Chapter 0, Prologue. Well, where should I start? Introductions, I guess. My name is Dale Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, single, and working as a truck driver for a catering company. Well, that's what it used to be like anyways. I should probably catch you up on what happened. So, yes, I can't put this off anymore. As I was driving back to the company to return the truck after a successful event, I felt myself growing tired. I wasn't really surprised, mind you. I had been pulling extra hours with my other job, working as a glamorous pizza delivery guy. Naturally, I did a lot of driving. Anyways, although I was getting tired, I made sure to stay focused on the road. It wouldn't be hard to close my eyes for a few minutes once I returned the truck, but I absolutely couldn't get into a crash. Aside from the heavy fine they'd slap me with, I'd lose my job, maybe even both of them if word got out. However, as I was turning the corner, my world came crashing down. It ended not with a bang, or a whisper, but with a rickroll. What? Don't judge, it's my cell phone's ringtone. I fumbled in my pocket trying to quickly fish it out when suddenly there was a loud scream from outside. Looking up, I saw a balding man with dirty blonde hair, glasses, and a large gut standing in the road, staring with wide eyes as my truck smashed into him. He seemed to be trying to make some gestures with his hands, likely signaling me to stop, but the truck didn't slow down in time. There was a very loud crash and I watched as his body bounced away, landing against the pavement with a sickening crunch. His neck and one of his legs were twisted the wrong way. By the time the truck had finally stopped, I was gripping the steering wheel hard enough that my fingers were turning white. I stared in shock as I knew, even without getting out to check, that the man was dead. I killed him. No matter how you looked at it, I had just killed a man with my truck. Forget just a fine and losing my job, I would even go to jail from this. Beads of sweat were quickly rolling down my face as I panicked, not sure what to do. It was at that point I noticed something. Nobody seemed to be moving. Not in a frozen in shock kind of way. They were actually not moving at all. Some were paused in mid-step, others with their mouth open in a silent scream, even a bird flying through the sky had stopped in its place. Next, the color seemed to be fading away. Blues, reds, the entire world gradually became varying shades of gray. Somehow, I was still able to move, so I lifted my hand up to my face and watched as the color drained from it. Am I dying? Did I have a heart attack or something? Next were shapes, which gradually became blurry and indistinct. This one, I was not even immune to, and I felt as though my body were dissolving into water. Looking around, I saw giant buildings swaying before they seemed to explode outwards in messy blobs, which then faded away into nothing. Finally, when even the shapes were no more, I was left in a gray landscape. Not a single feature could be made out, not of myself, the man I had just killed, or anything. Even my truck had gone away. Well, I guess I can't take my truck with me when I go. I began to close my eyes and accept my fate when a strange light appeared in front of me. World reset finalized. Welcome to the ranks of World Keeper. Please begin designing your new world with which you will participate. For options, simply think options. What? Options. Options, additional options will be available as you progress. Body designer, system companion designer, world designer, current statistics. Since I didn't have hands, I couldn't exactly press buttons, so I simply focused on body designer. Please imagine the body you wish to create. For your personal use. This body may be changed at any time through the options menu. Well, that was straightforward enough. I closed my eyes, or tried to before realizing I didn't have eyelids. Instead, I simply did my best to picture my old body. Okay, so I may have embellished a bit. Wouldn't you want to fix your receding hairline, or give yourself a bit of extra muscle if you had the chance? Let a guy try to save some self-esteem here. Besides, if this is purgatory, then at least I'm getting a pretty good deal out of it. Anyways, after imagining the body, I waited for several seconds, with nothing happening. Then, just as I was about to get up, there was a ding, the blue window changing. Body data accepted. Please wait while your new body is constructed. At that point, I could only stare as I was built from the ground up, literally. The gray light making up this world seemed to gather at my feet, and I actually had feet now. Then it started moving up, revealing legs, hips, my chest, everything. In a matter of only a few moments, my entire body had been created. To test it out, I blinked a few times, and I could manage to close my eyes. Okay. That's cool. But now what? I looked at the options again, and decided to try out the system companion thing. Maybe whatever that was would give me some clues on what I could do here. Please choose an option below. Custom companion, for experienced keepers who just want an extra companion to keep them company. Allows a modifiable body and mind, but does not contain system knowledge. Default companion, recommended for new keepers, contains extensive system knowledge and allows a modifiable body. Mind is randomized, but can be altered through natural growth. Well, that's not really a choice at all, is it? I asked myself, immediately choosing the default companion option. I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing. Even if this is purgatory, that doesn't mean I just want to sit around and do nothing for thousands of years when there is what seems to be some kind of game available. Input accepted. Please visualize a body for the companion. This one took me a while to decide. I mean, obviously I want a girl, alright? Wouldn't you want to spend an eternity with a beautiful woman? What, you think I should be more upset that I died, that I'll never see my loved ones again? Sorry, but my parents died a long time ago. And if I had a girlfriend or anything like that, why do you think I would be working 2 minimum wage jobs instead of aiming for something higher? If anything, dying means I don't have to go to jail for vehicular manslaughter, and I don't have to listen to my bosses nag at me. Wait, getting sidetracked. Closing my eyes, I began working on my ideal woman. It never said it had to be a human woman, right? I pictured a 5'10" woman with abundant breasts, nice curves, and cute cat ears. Of course, I included the tail to go with it. Her hair was red, matching the color of her ears and tail, and her eyes were green. Hopefully, she didn't have a bad personality. Body data accepted. Mind profile determined. Please wait while the companion is constructed. Again, I watched the gray light come together, and it gradually formed into the shape I had imagined. Just like with myself, it worked from the ground up. And just like myself, clothes were not part of the deal. I was not complaining, nor was my lower half, which was standing proudly once the body was finished. A moment later, her green eyes opened and she smiled at me. Hello, master. She spoke while bowing, which only served to give me an even better view. Do you have a name for me? Okay. I am man enough to admit that I was stunned for a long moment before I responded. Tara. Does that work? Her smile grew wider, and she nodded her head energetically. Thank you, it works perfectly. She stood up and gave a small jump in excitement. Oh yes. I definitely hit the jackpot with this kind of afterlife. And that was how I became a god. I think, anyways. Chapter 1, A Whole New World. Looking at the beautiful cat girl I had created, I did my best to suppress the drool that was subconsciously released. Business first, fun later. Lots and lots of fun later. So, Tara, what can you tell me about all of this? The option said you would have the information. Right, Dale, get your head together, gotta figure out the rules first. Don't want to do anything that would end this heavenly afterlife early. Oh, you mean the World Keeper's master? She looked to me inquisitively. Right? But just call me Dale, okay? While being called master was certainly appealing in its own way, it was way too distracting. Oh, alright Dale. And I have all of the necessary information that the system deemed important, as well as archived files regarding the last 3 iterations of planet Earth. Tara said with a broad smile. Huh, what was that? Wait, last 3? That's right. Every time the keeper is killed, the killer will inherit his position. Since each world is bound to a keeper, the loss of the keeper means the end of that instance. She then furrowed her brows slightly. The records show that you killed the last keeper due to a car accident, so you are Earth's new keeper. Ah. So that's what happened. Wait, what? You mean to tell me that because I hit some random guy with my truck, the entire world ended? You've got to be kidding me. That's right, Dale. Is everything okay? Wah, don't be depressed. Tara rushed over to me when I crouched down on the floor, patting me on the back. The last keeper's companion noted him as a lazy otaku, better off dead, so don't blame yourself too much, okay? Somehow. I feel sorry for the last keeper all of a sudden. He probably didn't luck out as well as I did when it came to companion personalities. Still, the whole world, just gone. All because of one insignificant car accident. What would happen if a keeper had a heart attack then, or killed himself? Would it just go to some random person, or would the world truly be destroyed? Dale. If you keep this up, I'll get angry, okay? Tara was still trying to console me, and I looked up to see her worried expression. I'll be fine. Go ahead with the explanations, please. Distractions are good right now, and Tara was definitely the best distraction. Okay. Well, I guess I should start with the abilities and duties of a keeper. Keepers create and oversee a world of their design, and guide it to prosperity. Once a world reaches a proper level of power, it is entered in the World Keeper games. In these games, you send your forces to fight against other worlds, or defend against such invasions yourself. The goal of the attacking team is to defeat the supreme existence of the other world, the Keeper. If a Keeper dies during the game, any worlds they control are given to the Keeper managing the winning army, and they are able to bolster their forces by creating and managing these new worlds. During the invasion, a Keeper is forced to descend, and can only use the powers or technologies which exist within the world. For instance, the last instance of Earth had the potential for instant disintegration weapons. However, the technology level had not reached the required amount yet. So, if the world was invaded, the Keeper would not have access to that technology. I felt my brows knit together as I tried to absorb this new information. But, I don't remember anything in history that would suggest Earth being invaded. Before. It was at that point that Tara frowned again. No, Earth hadn't reached the level to be part of the World Keeper games yet. The previous Keeper only advanced the world enough to provide his own entertainment, and then chose to live life on the surface. At the rate that Earth was going, the previous companion estimated it would take another 100 years before the first invasion. Ah. I see. I nodded my head marginally at that. Now, as long as you are in the administration room, which is where you reside by default, you are functionally immortal. You will neither age nor get sick, and nothing will be capable of hurting you. However, once you descend, your body becomes more normal. While you still cannot age, you can be killed normally by other means. Tara explained calmly, sitting down cross-legged in front of me and assuming an almost teacher-like attitude. In the administration room, you can change almost any aspects of your worlds as long as you can afford the points to do so. You could even entirely reset your world to start from scratch if you decided that you did not like how it was developing. When she mentioned points, I raised my eyebrows curiously, which she apparently noticed. With a smile, she continued her speech. Points can be gained through benchmark achievements, or participating in the games. You can also choose to descend to your world and work for points as well. To start with, you have 500 points to spend to start your world. What kind of world could I make? I decided I better find this out early on, otherwise I might be in for an even bigger surprise. Hearing my question, Tara grinned broadly. Theoretically, you could make any kind of world you wanted. The first iteration of Earth was one in which the Keeper tried a random mutation path. After humans evolved, they began developing random powers. While the Keeper wasn't able to determine what powers would appear, this was still a valid strategy. After all, when he descended, he would gain all of those powers at once. His record in the game was 3 successful invasions defended, before a power mutated that killed him. One of the humans was born with the unfortunate ability to be a living bomb. The second Earth was created as a futuristic one, complete with space travel and alien civilizations. Although the Keeper never won an invasion, he was able to create additional worlds thanks to the theme he chose. Sadly, he ran out of points trying to enhance his extra planets and had to descend to try to earn more. It was at that time that the ship he was on was drawn into a large war and he was killed. As for the third, and most recent Earth, you know all about it. The Keeper simply installed additional AI assistants as local deities to manage the world while he waited for the entertainment industry to advance far enough, then spent the rest of his days as a shut-in. Compared to the first 2 Keepers, who she seemed to speak about with admiration, she used a much harsher tone for the third. Ah. What about magic? She didn't mention anything about a fantasy world in that. Surely, such a thing would be possible, right? Tara nodded with a delighted smile. Of course, magic is possible. You could choose to create a fantasy world fueled by mana, or even a world in which the inhabitants are able to increase their lifespans through martial training. Would you like me to pull up the basic packages for you to look at? I thought about it, and then nodded to accept her proposal. She seemed rather happy that I was over my brief bout of depression, and almost instantly a window appeared describing different options available to me. Technological world. World size 5 to 40 points. Technology affinity -20 points. Education, 10 points. Package, 70 points. Cultivation World. World size 7 to 60 points. Martial Affinity minus 10 points. Zeta Magic Affinity minus 10 points. Longevity minus 30 points. Package, 110 points. Fantasy World. World size 6 to 50 points. Magic Affinity minus 20 points. Extra Sapient Races minus 30 points. Package, 100 points. Mutant World. World size 4 to 30 points. Randomized Mutation, 100 points. Package, 130 points. Custom World. World size 1 to 0 points. Package, 0 points. These packages don't seem very extensive. I looked suspiciously at Tara, who simply smiled. Don't worry, there are way more options to choose from after you pick a starting package. These are just here to help you get started. I nodded slightly and selected the Fantasy World package. Magic has always fascinated me, and watching a real world evolve with magic would be really cool. Suddenly, the scenery around us changed. No longer were we in a gray landscape, but instead we seemed to be standing miles above the surface of a lush, green planet. Down below, I could faintly make out trees, lakes, and mountains in the distance. Alright, that's step 1. Tara called out happily, raising her arms in triumph. Must not look at those glorious, bouncing hills. Must focus. Now, since this package included extra sapient races, you can design up to 10 species to place as the sapient races of this world. Each one starts with base human abilities, which can be increased or lowered to affect their point total. If the total is a positive amount after adjustments, then you will need to pay additional points to finalize the race. Don't worry, because you don't need to create all 10 right away. Any race slots that you don't use will be saved for later. Tara explained with a quick nod, so I got to work on another window that appeared in front of me. Race name. Comprehension 7. Agility 5. Strength 5. Lifespan 75. Luck 5. Awareness 4. Male, female ratio 1.06. Example adult male. Example adult female. Racial abilities. For the first one, I decided to just leave it at default, filling the race name as human. No matter what world you go to, humans are definitely the staple race, right? As for the second one, naturally it had to be elf, right? I tried to fine-tune it for the elves, and had to adjust some things. Of course, an elf's lifespan can't be as low as 75 years, so I increased that to 600. This brought the point cost of the race to 10, so I reduced their comprehension to 5 and raised their agility to 6. This should, hopefully, make them learn more at the pace that their bodies develop, while also making them faster than humans. Next, I gave them the second level of magic affinity for another 20 points. I made a few more adjustments, until finally I came up with this. Race name, Elf. Comprehension 5. Agility 6. Strength 5. Lifespan 600. Luck 5. Awareness 6. Male-female ratio 0.89. Example adult male. Example adult female. Racial abilities, magical affinity 0.2. Okay, that should be good for that race. I nodded to myself, before I got to work on the other races. Aside from the elves, most of them balanced out fairly well when I tweaked their stats. In total, I made dwarves, halflings, and beastcats, dogs, bears, and foxes. That left me with 2 extra race slots, which I decided to save for later. Maybe I'd make demons and dragons once the world developed more? Ready now, Dale? Tara asked curiously, to which I nodded without fully understanding what she meant. Okay. Now, we're going to fast forward the planet by a few millennia until your world has a population of about 80,000. That will be a good time to start developing culture and choosing your magic system. Before I had a chance to react to that, the scenery below us began rapidly moving. The tiny figures that dotted the ground ran about at high speeds, with day and night passing in the blink of an eye. What? What do you mean magic system? I asked after I managed to compose myself. The shock of the world suddenly going at high speeds had startled me for a moment. Oh, there are various types of magic you can install on the planet. For instance, you could go with a rune language that rewrites the fabric of reality. You could install gods that manage certain aspects of the world and grant their followers power related to their domains. You could even choose to have the magic work either through imagination or geometric formulas. Ah! Wow! There were way more options here than I had expected. Then again, I didn't really know what to expect in the first place. What about culture? Same thing. She replied with a shrug. Though, with culture, you can just choose to leave it at default and let them develop naturally. If you wish to guide them down a specific path, that will cost additional points. I nodded my head slightly and took a look at my remaining points. 350 left. I could probably afford some pretty cool things with that. Though, judging by how expensive some things have been, I should probably spend sparingly. Chapter 2, Feminine Wiles. Okay. Show me all of the options for magic systems, Tara. I waited patiently for the options to appear. Right, Dale. She said with a happy grin, before a blue panel manifested in front of me. Imagination system, magic is limited only by the user's imagination. As long as they have the energy and the willpower, they can create any effect they desire, 80 points. Geometric system, magic is bound by a strict rule of mathematic formulas. Greatly restricts the flexibility of magic, but effects can be used at a much lower cost to the caster, 50 points. Limited system, choose one of the other magic systems, and apply specific limitations. For instance, the imagination system may be limited by bloodline. Dependent on limitations, runic system. There is a language of magic that permeates your world. Any who know the proper words can bend the fabric of reality to their whim. This magic comes at practically no cost to the user, but they must use their own efforts to learn each individual rune, 75 points. Custom system, you may self-define a system of magic if none of these options are suitable to your world. If the system acknowledges your design, it will be assigned a price and placed on the list for future worlds. You may also earn a small income of points whenever your system is chosen by another keeper. Game system, this is not directly a system for magic, but can greatly influence the magic system. After choosing this option, you may begin development of a game system for your world. This system will contain classes, stats, and levels, and may aid or restrict the learning of magic, according to your design, 150 points. I looked over the options for a moment, and did a double take when I saw the one at the bottom. The game system was nearly twice as expensive as the next biggest choice. I mean, I could understand that, as this system would influence far more than just magic, and could potentially even make magic easier to use as well. Taking a look at my remaining points, I grit my teeth and chose the game system option. This was a bit of a gamble, but in the worst case scenario I could just reset my world to get the points back. I'm not very far in right now, so it's not like I will lose much work. Welcome to the World Keeper game design interface. This tutorial will help guide you through the step-by-step process of integrating your very own world system into your world. Be warned, additional features may cost extra points, so balance carefully. The next. I am not really sure how long I spent, but it felt like a day or two at least. Anyways, during that time I was going through drop-down menus, selecting things like what classes were available, how monsters were treated, and so on. Once I got to the mage class, I ended up having to choose the magic system all over again. Though this time, the options were a bit different. I could either let the game automatically assign spells based on mage levels, or choose one of the previous systems. But I had to pay half the price for the other system option. I ended up choosing the geometric system option this time, costing me another 25 points. At the same time, I added some basic spells to automatically be acquired with levels, to serve as a starting point for the mage's research. Just things like Fireball, Wind Wall, and the like. As for what classes were available, I decided to select all of the ones that were relevant to a fantasy world. Simply making a class available didn't have a cost value associated with it, but some required conditions to be set for gaining the class. For instance, the hero class, the lowest requirement I could set for it for free was single-handedly defeating a monster 20 levels above themselves. I didn't foresee that class being very common in the future. Now, the only other part that actually cost me more points was the holy magic system. Since I included priests, clerics, and bards in the mix, I had to define the holy magic system. For this, I needed at least 3 gods from which the divine classes could draw their power from. I could assign Terra and myself as one of the gods if I wanted, but I really didn't want to have to listen to things like prayers and divinations all the time. So, instead I bought 3 AI gods at the cheapest price. For 25 points each, they could grant magic related to their domain to their followers, but would offer very minimal interference in the world. I decided to name the first one Re-One, Goddess of Wealth. The second was Baina, Goddess of Battle. And finally, I had Udina, Goddess of Life. Why are they all goddesses, you ask? Now that is a silly question. I am making a heavenly host, and you think I won't make it full of people I find physically attractive? I mean, really? I will fully admit that I am a pervert, and be proud of it. As for the goddesses, I decided to assign them the races of elf, human, and kitsune, the name given to the fox beast kin, respectively. Sadly, since I bought them so cheap, they would not have personalities until I spent points to upgrade them. Anyways, with that taken care of, I was finally done with the core of the game system. And the grand total came to 250 points. It's okay. This will take care of most of your future needs as well. It's an investment, Dale, an investment. I mentally reassured myself before clicking the buy button. Just like that. Half of my starting points vanished all at once. Congratulations. You have earned 2 achievements. For spending over 200 points, you earned the basic keeper achievement. Plus 20 points. For spending at least 250 points in a single purchase, you earned the spendthrift achievement. Plus 20 points. Well, at least that is a small consolation. I spent over 200 points, but got 40 back. So now my total is 165. I'm really going to have to budget myself at this rate. So, what do you want to do for culture? Tara asked with a smile, having waited patiently until I was done before speaking up. Oh. Can I hold off on that for now? I asked with another sad glance to my remaining balance. Sure, Dale. Tara nodded her head in response. Right now, they are at what you would consider the Stone Age, so there is still a great deal of time to see what direction their culture develops before we get involved. That was a pretty good point. Then, what is the point of buying culture so early? Wouldn't it always make more sense to just wait and see how things go? Hearing my question, Tara once again assumed her teacher attitude, quickly sitting up straight. I'm sorry, I definitely was not looking at your naked chest just now. Well, the difference is in development speed and history. For instance, in the second iteration of Earth, when the Keeper decided to pursue an advanced technology route, he selected a technology culture from the very beginning. This led to several people being born ahead of their time, which caused rapid innovation. Technology advanced at least twice as fast as in the Earth you grew up, because all of the major influences in history were designed to advance the culture in that direction. I furrowed my brows together, thinking about it, before nodding my head. So, if I leave it how it is, then the world could develop in a completely random direction. One race could rise to power and enslave all the others, or they could coexist peacefully. Tara nodded her head happily as she heard that. That's right. Also, she suddenly frowned, leaning forward with her hands on the artificial ground below us, arms inadvertently pressing her chest together. Why didn't you let me be one of your goddesses? She was sporting a real pouting face, and it was at this point I discovered that my new companion knew exactly how to get me to agree to whatever she wanted. Well, I thought that you wouldn't like to handle all of the annoying prayers and everything associated with it. I did my best to maintain eye contact, because looking anywhere else would be dangerous right now. I don't care about any of that. She quickly said, shaking her head. I can't actually do anything if you don't make me a goddess, you know. I'll just be stuck up here all the time, twiddling my thumbs whenever you go down to the world. Huh? Is that how it is? I asked in genuine confusion. I figured she could do stuff through the system like I could. Yeah. If I'm just a system companion, all I can do is advise you. If you make me a goddess, then I'll be able to influence things in the world related to my domain. Ah. I think I get it. Well, what would you like to be a goddess of? I asked, cautiously. I was really hoping she wasn't going to pick something like goddess of love. I mean, maybe I wasn't completely okay with sharing my dream girl with everyone in the world, alright? How about the goddess of fate? That way, I could do a lot of little interactions to change the world without making too big of a mess. She had a beaming smile as she asked that, and I just really couldn't say no, so, before she had the time to change her mind and pick something more lewd, I opened the interface for the game system and assigned her as the fourth goddess, Goddess Tara of Fate. The change only cost me 5 points, since I was not creating a new AI, but instead simply assigning deity rights to one that already existed. Yay! She called out, hopping to her feet and doing a quick dance when she felt the changes taking place. I won't make you regret that, Dale. She said happily, before jumping at me and wrapping me in her arms. As for what happened next, Well, I'm sure everyone can guess without me saying it, right? Let's just say she was very thankful for her new job. After we had finished having our fun, Tara stretched out lazily on the ground with a content smile. Holding her with one arm, I looked around the open area. We could still see everything below, so this was not exactly a nice home. Maybe some people with a god complex would like it, but I didn't really care that much for it. Is there some way we can change the admin room, or would that cost points? Tara shook her head, still smiling happily. The administration room can be changed freely, without worrying about expenses. After all, this room in no way affects the power of the world below. Would you like to change it to something specific? She let out a long purr as she felt my hand rubbing her back when she asked. Could we change it to look like a modern house? With enough room for all of the goddesses? She thought about that for a moment, and then nodded. Alright, we can do that. How about something like this? By the time she finished speaking, we were resting on a large, red bed in the center of a big room. Looking around, the floor was soft carpet, and there was even a computer desk in the corner. So, if you can do all this, why did the last keeper descend to Earth instead of getting all of his entertainment up here? I asked in honest confusion. I mean, from the looks of it, he could get everything he needed here without needing to risk his neck on the surface. Tara simply giggled in response, scooting over closer to me on the bed. Because the companion he got kept nagging him to advance his world and join the games. Since he didn't give her a god status, he could run away to the surface without her being able to reach him. From what the companion noted, he sold all of his other god AIs a few years before he died, to prevent her from using them to contact him. Ah! I couldn't help but laugh when hearing that. Apparently, the last keeper's companion really wanted to take part in the games, so she kept pushing him to advance. But, being the person he was, he just wanted to live life casually. I really hit the jackpot, then. I grinned, leaning over to kiss Tara, whose smile became even brighter at that. Later, after resting a bit, I learned some of the changes to the admin room. Although each goddess had their own room, they were as bland and featureless as the personalities of the goddesses themselves. Further, there was no actual door leading out of the admin room. That was because there was really nothing else to see out there. Instead, the link to view the world had been moved to two places. One in the living room, by watching the TV and navigating with the remote, and the other in my bedroom with the computer, navigating the world and its information like I was playing a video game. Content with the changes so far, I decided to fast forward the game to the next era, and see how it progressed on its own. Since eras were marked by cultural and technological advancements, as well as important decisions, I didn't have to worry that I'd miss too much. According to Tara, even a major war breaking out would be enough to count as a new era, so it was safe to leave it alone for a while. Besides, I had more fun things to do now. Chapter 3, Thy Kingdom Come. When I woke up the next day, well, it was probably the next day at least. We really needed some way to determine time for the admin room. Anyways, when I got up, I noticed that the computer was flashing an indication, showing that the fast forward had stopped. Tara didn't seem to be paying much attention to it as she was curled up happily at the foot of my bed. Giving a mild chuckle at her state, I got up and moved over to the computer, glad that I did not have to worry about certain biological needs anymore. I mean, I basically don't have to worry about any of it if I don't want to. I can still sleep, but it's not like I need it, you know? Back on topic, when I got to the computer, I gave a quick look at the map of the world. This was actually more information than I had received when I was simply looking at the world from above, as it clearly marked the locations of the various racial settlements. Furthermore, it also included things such as population. The first race of Earth has entered the civilization era. Elves have begun joining together to found a country, naming it Gander. Elves, population, 12,000. Average level, 5. Humans, population, 25,000. Average level, 7. Felon, population, 15,000. Average level, 7. Lycan, population, 12,000. Average level, 6. Ursa, population, 13,000. Average level, 8. Kitsune, population, 18,000. Average level, 7. Dwarf, population, 20,000. Average level, 6. Halfling population, 25,000. Average level, 4. Current kingdoms established, Gander. Well, that was interesting, at least. And, looking at the map, the various beast tribes were starting to come together as well, just a little bit behind the elves. Or, at least, they were moving to the same area, and not showing signs of fighting. As for the humans, halflings, and dwarfs, they were still little more than scattered tribes. On the bright side, the different races spawned on vastly different parts of the planet, meaning that there would still be a long time before they encountered each other. That should give each race enough of a start to build up their own empires before worrying about any sort of invasion. Well, I'd let that play out a little more. As such, I decided to have it fast forward until the next kingdom was established, and check on the progress then. Eldwyn Ryan was the elected leader of the Elven people. Following her mother's death centuries ago, she had chosen to devote herself to the elves, to help them understand this strange new world that they lived in. Lesser races may not remember, but the long-lived elves knew clearly that things had changed. It was Eldwyn's grandmother who was one of the first to be introduced to the world system, which has since become a common part of their lives. With the system, came certain knowledge and abilities. Abilities far beyond their knowledge. Suddenly, certain elves had gained the ability to create fire by drawing strange symbols in the ground. These were recognized as mages by the system, and for some years they were seen as a disease. It couldn't be helped, the elves were still yet to properly develop. But Eldwyn sought to change that. She herself was a mage, and had unlocked the second of these strange spells. This second spell was one completely different from the first, as it would conjure ice that could trap a foe. Displaying her power to the other elves, as well as her apparent relation to the elven goddess, Riwan, it did not take long for people to rally behind her. With her guidance, she led the elves to settle on the plains of her birth, where she began ordering them to construct shelters. This would be their first true home. No more would they wander, no more would they be afraid of the Barghests and the Gru. Now, they would be the ones in control of their land. To honor her ancestors, Eldwyn named this new settlement Gandr after her grandmother. Although the density of the population invited attacks from the braver monsters, it did not take long before they learned how to set up patrols to guard the city day and night. And in this manner, the guards gradually became more powerful as well. They received things known as skills, some even obtained new classes. But they all remembered that this was brought to them by Eldwyn, who they now revered as being close to the goddess. Off in the far plains to the east, on an entirely different continent from the elves, a muscular woman was running on all fours. She had fiery red hair, and fur-covered ears and a tail. Those around would know her as a felon, one of the cat beastkin. But more importantly, she was Ardra, a priestess in service to the great goddess Terra. For years she had wished to be given a sign from her goddess, who had chosen her at birth. She had been lost, confused. Her people scattered across the hills and plains. Wandering tribes with no true home, living off the land and moving when danger neared. However, she finally had her prayers answered. The goddess had given her a message. Go forth, my child, and gather the tribes. Though you may be weak alone, together you will thrive. Deliver my message to the leaders of every family. A new dawn is approaching for your people, and under the leadership of the felon, the beastkin shall see power they have never known before. At first, Ardra had doubted her sanity, thinking that the voice in her mind had been a mere dream. However, it came again the next day, and the day after. Finally, she told the leader of her own family, and a light from the heavens descended down upon her as she spoke. From that point, none doubted her words, least of all herself. She ran day and night, sleeping and eating only when necessary. She did not even think about where she was going, letting her goddess guide her steps. Yet somehow, she would always find her way to another wandering family. And, upon delivering the message, the light would again shine upon her from above as if reassuring her of her mission. She lost count of the number of families she had already spoken with, how many she had convinced to join the gathering. But, the voice once again whispered in Ardra's mind. Soon, my child. Soon, your mission will be over. Soon, you will see the reward for your work, for you have done well in my name. When Ardra heard the voice again, her tired limbs seemed to gain new life, her speed increasing further. Whether this was some divine intervention or her own body overcoming its limits out of excitement, she knew not. Nor did she care, for she was doing the goddess's work. While I was waiting for the world to progress, I decided to go wake Terra up. This was a surprisingly easy task, considering how soundly she seemed to be sleeping. Once I rubbed her back and called her name a couple of times, she let out a loud purr and turned over to smile at me. Yes, Dale. Is there something I can help you with? I nodded my head, saying something I was probably going to regret forever. Yeah. Do you think that you could put in a wardrobe or something in the admin room? Not that I don't love to look at you naked or anything, but it'd be nice to be able to wear clothes again. She snickered slightly when she heard my question, before nodding. Sure thing. Anything else? Hmm. Could you help me research magic? You said that I have access to any of the powers that are present in my world, but I don't really know how to make them work yet. This time, her eyes seemed to brighten, waking up considerably as she nodded, sitting up on the bed. Alright, I can help with that. Although I can't directly teach you anything that hasn't been discovered yet, I can show you all of the known diagrams, and give you the information behind them. That way, you should be able to come up with some of the information yourself once you have enough to piece things together. That sounds pretty neat, actually. So, how do we get started? You said that I can't be hurt in the admin room, but I don't want to take the chance of hurting you if I mess up during the practice. When I said that, she grinned happily, before wrapping me up in a warm hug. Oh, don't worry about that. Unless you purposely choose to delete or injure us through the system, the AIs in the admin room are also functionally immortal. She winked playfully at me. You could abuse me all day and night and it wouldn't leave a single mark when you were done. Well, can't really say I'd want to abuse her, but there were other physically exhausting things that could be done. I'll just file that away for later. That's good. So, how many spells are actually known so far? Tara tilted her head in thought, before nodding slightly. Looks like there are 5. 1 for the priest class, 2 for mage, 1 for spirit tamer, and 1 for druid. Hadn't expected anyone to get the spirit tamer class so soon, but it looks like the elves managed to stumble on it. For right now, we'll be going over the mage spells. The other classes all use a different casting method, so it wouldn't be too good to try to train them all at once. That sounded pretty reasonable, so I agreed. Tara focused on something for a moment before the area around us shifted. We were now in a wide-open, stone room with torches lining the walls. This can be our testing ground. I put it in the basement of the admin room if you ever decide to come down here without me. She smiled slightly when she said that. Now, I'll show you the basic spell diagram for the fire spell. Tara knelt down and began tracing various shapes with her hand. Whenever her finger touched the ground, it seemed to light up, leaving the image of what she was drawing clear to see. In order to cast the spell, you can either draw this on something and channel your energy through it, or visualize it in your mind. Naturally, the first method uses a lot less energy, but has less freedom. Specifically, she moved her finger to point at the center of the formation. Whatever you draw here will be the path your fire takes. Leaving it blank will simply create a stationary fire, while drawing a line will make the fire shoot out, or drawing a circle will make the fire fly in a circle. If you draw this on an object, you'll generally have to carry that object with you, and not have enough time to alter it for different scenarios. You give it a shot. Since this is the admin room, you should have unlimited energy reserves to work with once you can get the control right. Well, that didn't seem too hard. I stared at the pattern she had drawn on the ground, burning it into my mind. Once I was confident I had fully copied it, I closed my eyes and tried to feel inside of myself for the energy that Tara had mentioned. I didn't know if this was supposed to be Kai, or mana, or whatever, but I soon felt several different energies. Furrowing my brow, I tried to sort through them. One felt chaotic, like it could erupt at any moment. One felt peaceful, like a flowing ocean. Yet another felt as if it was a gas, evading my grip every time I thought I had it. Finally, I settled on one that felt like a warm, blue light inside of myself. That seemed like the closest thing to magic, but I would need to ask Tara what the other energies were once I was done with this. Grasping what I assumed was my magical energy, I once again conjured the image of the fire spell diagram into my mind, guiding my magic into it. I could feel as the diagram lit up with the same warm blue light. But nothing happened. Opening my eyes, I confirmed that there was nothing different about my surroundings. Well, it seems like you found your magic. You probably just forgot part of the diagram. She shook her head with a small smile, giving me time to stare at the diagram again. This time, I already had my magic ready, so once I closed my eyes, I focused on the diagram. I wouldn't allow myself time to forget, and before I knew it, I felt something warm in front of me. Very warm. Hot. I quickly opened my eyes and discovered that my hand was on fire. I knew I should be screaming from pain right now, but it really didn't hurt that bad. I felt hot, as if my hand was hovering above a burning fire, rather than as if my hand was on fire. I like admin room cheats. I really do. Congratulations. You have earned a new achievement. For learning your first ability from your world, you earned the copycat achievement. Plus 10 points. You did it, Dale. Tara called out happily, though maybe it would have been more of a triumph if I didn't light myself on fire. Nonetheless, she seemed excited since it worked, and moved on to show me the rest of the known magic. This was going to be a pretty busy day. Chapter 4, Magic. Magic. After my little study session to grasp the 2 known spells, Tara sat down a distance away from me while I practiced them. According to her, I would not have the auto-cast benefit that people of my world would have for the spells acquired at different levels. The exception to this was if I went down to the world and manually trained the classes. Even then, the auto-cast feature would only work for the basic spells that the casting classes automatically received. With that in mind, I decided that it would be better to get used to doing the work myself. I'd like to say I mastered it all in just a few hours, but I actually got bored after a couple dozen times casting the same spell and decided to sit down on the ground for a bit to relax. Looking over to Tara, I went ahead and asked something that had been on my mind for a bit. Are there any other energy types other than magic? I felt something different when I focused earlier. I explained to her about the 3 other energies that seemed to be contained in my body, and she nodded with a satisfied smile. That's right, Dale. Right now, your world has 4 kinds of energy that can be wielded, though that might grow later on depending on how you develop. These are mana, ki, spiritual energy, and natural energy. The first 2 are internal energies, while the latter are external ones. If we weren't in the admin room, you probably would not be able to feel spiritual or natural energy in yourself, but this is a place where you are meant to be able to test whatever you want. So, I'll go over them in order. The energy you described as a peaceful ocean was probably your ki. That is an energy wielded primarily by the monk class, but other fighting classes will eventually get some access to it. Tara then closed her eyes and seemed lost in thought. Right now, it looks like there are almost 20 monks in your world, but none of them have gone beyond level 3 in that class. So, they have only really gotten one ability that I can help you learn, and that is the ki fist. If you want to try it, simply channel your ki to your hand, and push it out with a punch. I nodded, deciding that I would try that after her explanation was over. Next, the chaotic energy. That is natural energy, which exists everywhere. Druids, shamans, and other nature-related classes use this to perform their magic in a different way than the classes that use mana. They send their will into the natural energy around them and issue commands. If their will is strong enough to tame the energy, then their magic will work. But, the more complicated the command, the more difficult it is to create. I told you that there is one spell available for druids right now, and that is the burn spell. Unlike the mage's fire spell, burn directly ignites the target, dealing damage over time. As you can imagine, that is done by connecting with the natural energy surrounding the target and commanding it to burn. Finally coming to the last type of energy, Tara took a deep breath. Really, why did you need to add all of the classes? The last energy, spiritual energy, is found wherever the dead are gathered. This energy is built upon the souls of man and beast. By weaving the energy together, you can tame spirits to become your companions, or even create entirely new ones by taking fragmented souls. Nobody has gone past level 2 for Spirit Tamer yet, so they only have the basic spell to see spirit essence. This is actually done with mana, not spiritual energy. However, it is a raw application of mana, not a diagram. Simply focus the mana in your eyes while concentrating on finding spirits and it will work. You shouldn't bother to try it here because naturally nothing dies in the admin room. I nodded my head at that. I see, so, the spells of the mage class are actually the hardest to learn and use, huh? I gave a bitter smile as I realized that. Tara simply giggled, nodding her head. That's right. However, they are also generally the most powerful with the system you've designed. One druid might be able to do 5 times the variety of magic as a mage, but a single mage can cast magic for twice as long and at double the strength. That's due to the diagram system that was put in place. With it, magic spells are more difficult to cast, but use less energy for more power. I thought about that, and it did seem like a good balancing mechanic. Alright. Well, let's get back to this. Sighing, I stood up and resumed the practice of the 2 spells. I don't suppose it would be possible to get a spellbook that has these spells for easy reference, would it? I asked with a wry smile. Tara grinned. Yup, you could. But the people of your world haven't discovered how to make paper yet, so you won't be able to take it with you if you descend. You could use it as a study guide, though. As she spoke, a book appeared in my hand, thick with hundreds of pages. In surprise, I opened it, only to be disappointed that just the first 2 pages had been filled. Didn't think I was allowed to make it that easy for you, did you? She asked with a small smile. I could hope, right? I shook my head and got on with the other training. Setting my book down, I once again focused on my internal energies. This time, I concentrated primarily on the flowing key, sensing it through my body. I could easily tell that it moved along certain paths, weaving around and through my blood vessels. I guess these are probably meridians or something, then? Furrowing my brows, I tried to direct the flow of boundless energy into my right hand. This was easier said than done, as it resisted me for several minutes before following my instructions. Once the energy was in my hand, I balled it up into a fist and punched down at the ground. There was a small shockwave, and when I opened my eyes I saw that there was a 1-inch deep crater where I had punched. Pretty neat, if I do say so myself. Next, I decided to go ahead and try the last spell available to me with the Druid magic system. Again I closed my eyes, focusing on the natural energy hidden in my body. From how Tara described it, I would need to move it out into the room before giving it a command if I didn't want to set myself on fire again. Surprisingly, that step went by fairly easy, the energy immediately accepting the transfer. Host privileges, I guess. Anyways, after the energy was outside of my body, I focused intently on it. Burn. I heard a small explosion in front of me, followed by a quick hey. That made me open my eyes. Tara was on her hands and knees about 20 feet away, her tail sticking straight up. Watch it, okay? That was too close. She said in an angry pout, and I looked towards where she had been. The air just a few feet from her previous location was literally on fire, burning with no apparent fuel or target. Ah. Sorry. I smiled apologetically. From my earlier experiments, I knew that even if there was no real pain, that does not mean fire wasn't uncomfortably hot. However, she was still pouting after my apology, only relaxing slightly as her tail lowered back down. Anyways, I think we're done here for now, ready to go back up. She thought about it for a moment, before nodding. Yeah, I need a cat nap. A moment later, the room around us vanished, and we were back in our bedroom. Thankfully, the book came with us, and was now sitting on my computer desk. Before you do anything else I should know? Tara simply shrugged noncommittally. Should be all. On the computer. After saying that, she hopped on the bed and rolled around a few times before getting comfortable. Guess she's still annoyed about the fire thing. Not entirely my fault, but understandable. We'll see if I can cheer her up later. Before investigating what was new on the computer, I decided to check on the status of my people. Not surprisingly, the Second Kingdom had been set up, though it had a rather suspicious name. Beast Kingdom, Terraria. Glancing back at the bed, I had the feeling that someone wanted to give the beastmen a little boost. The fact that the Felon were apparently the ruling class of this kingdom only served to reinforce that thought. Not like it really mattered, though. I did give her the right to do stuff like that as the goddess of fate, and I could make sure that she wouldn't take it too far. Out of curiosity, I checked out the Elven Kingdom of Gander to see how they were doing. According to the timeline, it had only been roughly 20 years since Gander was founded. From 12,000 elves, it seems that they have begun expanding a bit. Maybe there was some celebration, or festival, or something else, but they now had nearly 15,000 total population. As for the other races, they were still little more than nomadic families. It probably wouldn't be too much longer before they began setting up their own homelands, but for now they were just doing good not to die from the monsters. Thankfully, the monsters on Earth were set up to follow a fairly simple rule. Monsters would not be born that were more than twice as strong as any one sapient. Though, since I had only bought the basic monster package for now, the others are a bit expensive, so sue me, the monsters will cap out at level 100. Now, before I go check out other things, let's see what kind of options are available for culture. Since it seemed like Tara wanted to manage the beastmen for now, I went back to the elves. Naturally, their current culture was set to unaltered, but there were various options for how I could direct it if I wanted. And some of these options were unique. such as sexual paradise, an option that is described as turns the culture more towards physical pleasure, where ecstasy is both a service and a currency. Yeah, no way am I selecting that option. I may be a total pervert, but that does not mean that I want to lose the first game I get in because my planet is full of hedonists. Looking at the other options, I note that there is one that actually does not cost any points. And that is manual advice. According to its description, if I choose this option, I will be able to either have one of my goddesses communicate directly with one of their followers, or speak to someone myself and deliver a message. This message would be transmitted directly into the mind of the target, but the effects are uncertain. I debated on whether or not to use that option. I mean, if used properly, you could guide the entire path of civilization by whispering to the right people. On the other hand, the person might be seen as insane for saying that there was a voice in their head telling them to do things. The trick would be figuring out who to speak with and deciding what to have the message be. I'll get back to that later, still plenty of time. I went ahead and closed the map of the world, seeing if there was anything else on this computer. Tara did say that everything I needed was here, after all. And I could hope that she was telling the truth and not just pouting because I almost singed her tail. As it turns out, she was. There was actually a second program on the computer, one that I was very familiar with. Though the name was a bit off, I quickly clicked on the button labeled KeeperNet Explorer, wondering what kinds of things they would have on the interworld internet. First, the homepage appeared to be a forum for keepers, with various topics such as user-submitted content, known keeper worlds, and guild recruitment. I noticed that I already seemed to be logged in under the username EarthForcione. Chat request has been received from Alcahest. Do you wish to accept? Blinking in surprise, I decided to accept the message. I hadn't been on the KeeperNet for more than 5 minutes, but someone was already trying to contact me. Alcahest, hey, man. Long time no see. What happened? You went dark for a while. I shook my head in resignation when I saw that message. They were probably friends with one of the previous keepers. EarthForcione, think you have the wrong person. Just started this whole keeper thing a couple days ago. Alcahest, seriously? Damn, though that does explain a few things. Glad to see that Earth wasn't lost to another keeper or anything, at least. Ah, well, bound to happen sooner or later. Since you're still new, need any help? Or do you have it taken care of? I considered that. I mean, I didn't really have any reason to trust this guy, but at the same time I didn't have that much reason not to at least hear him out. In the end, I decided to accept his offer. EarthForcione, why not? Alcahest, that's the spirit. Now, since you inherited his world, I'll help you out a bit. First thing you need to keep in mind, try to stay involved. It's real easy to forget that we were once like the people we're managing, you know. EarthForcione, I guess. Not really a lot to get involved with at this point, is there? Alcahest, that's where you're wrong. I don't know what kind of setting you made this Earth, but there's always something you can do. Whisper a theory to a talented mind, spawn a treasure for a group to find, or a monster that pushes their limits. Some people even go the Merlin route and find a strong soul that they stay with for years in order to make him a grand ruler. EarthForcione, that makes sense, I think. EarthForcione, why are you helping me anyways? Aren't all keepers enemies, or something? Alcahest, wow, you really are a rookie. I mean, I guess you could look at it like that. But everyone needs some friends. And no matter how real the people planet Sid are, it's just not the same when you know that you basically control every aspect of their life. Well, since I got a hold of you, how about you join my guild? That one didn't really take much thought. While he did raise some good points, this was still way too early for me to get involved with another group. For all I knew, he was trying to mislead me and none of his advice was really good. And even if it was, he might be using me for some other purpose. EarthForcione, sorry, but don't think I'm ready for anything like that yet. Alcahest, no worries, option is there anytime. With that, I decided to go ahead and search more through the forums. Who knew, maybe there was some other useful information that could be gained from them. Chapter 5, Market Value. While looking through the forums, my mind naturally drifted towards the user-submitted content. From what the description had said earlier on when I was assigning the magic system for Earth, this was an easy way to earn an income of points, though I doubted how useful it would be. For instance, how many people would assign their worlds an entirely new magic system if their own world had already progressed considerably? Most likely, the point income would come from either new keepers, or keepers that are starting new worlds. However, there should be other types of content that keepers can create and submit, such as special minerals or unique technology. This kind of content could be purchased by any keeper, regardless of how long their world has been running. It would be an easy thing to place a formerly unknown element in a world and have it naturally discovered, or have a new technology created. As such, I decided to look at what kinds of content was already there. To my surprise, there really was a lot. Elements like mithril, orichalcum, and a few others I've never heard of were present, as were many different systems. The game system that my world was using was even listed in the user-submitted content, as well as several of the classes I was currently using in my world. Well, it makes sense that was created by a keeper. Maybe they wanted to make their world more like the admin room with its video game theme. I nodded my head slightly and continued looking. Each piece of content had its own price as well as the royalty which the original creator would receive. The royalty generally seemed to be 10% of the content's actual price. Now, what really surprised me was something else altogether. There were actually two pieces of custom content listed as being created by Earthforcione, the username I was assigned. The first, Random Power Mutation, was listed as being worth 150 points, and caused people in the world to randomly mutate to gain special powers. However, from the comments on the thread, it did not seem like a popular choice because of the very flaw that caused the death of the person who submitted it. The second piece of content was Warp Drive Connection, a technology tree which allowed tech-themed worlds to connect to each other by means of faster-than-light travel. This one actually seemed more popular, even though it cost a whole 300 points. The price on that confused me until I thought about it more deeply. The destination when using warp technology in sci-fi stories was not always fixed. More often than not, you would emerge at uninhabited worlds, or even completely empty space. So, the high cost is actually an investment to get potentially unlimited extra worlds to start with. There was even a level of the tech tree which allowed you to choose whether or not discovered worlds were inhabited, and if so to assign them races. It didn't say anything about what level of technology the new world would have, so I didn't bother looking too deep. Even if I assume that I get 10% off as being technically the creator of the content, which would normally be the royalty I receive when it is purchased, I am nowhere near able to afford that system. Well, at least I'll be able to get some income every now and then from people buying this. Though, maybe I should create my own content. It's been long enough that anyone that wanted to buy the Warp Drive Connection could have done so during the previous keeper's reign. So again, I would probably need to wait a while before getting anything back for it. Tilting my head back in thought, I first decided to check what other content had been published. If I see what isn't an option for me to create, I can get hints on what would be. To my surprise, I found multiple systems that looked like they should have been considered magic systems. The first, and most obvious example, was a ritual system. By offering up certain items during a ceremony, it was possible to receive magical effects. How is that not a magic system? As I was wondering that, I caught sight of a tag at the bottom. It actually was a magic system, but was tagged as advanced, whatever that meant. Maybe only magic systems that can be used quickly were listed at the start when you create a world. There was another system that was somewhat similar to that, listed by a Lord Slow. This system was a skill-based system which awarded magical effects based on how well you performed certain skills, such as sculpting or music. I shuddered as I imagined how terrifying it would be to go to a death metal concert and have that system suddenly activate. Though, there was another piece of content submitted by the same person that caught my eye. This was a race template, meant to guide people to create races that would not destroy the balance of their world. This particular race was known as the Demon Race. They had the unique trait of meritocracy evolution, meaning that they would evolve into different forms based on their own work. Their starting form was simply an imp with the lowest level of stats, but if that imp worked hard enough and continued evolving, it could eventually become a demon king. The demon race content had a note attached to it, suggesting for users with already developed worlds to wait until they received a new world in order to place the demons in. Then, connect the worlds through whatever means the keeper wanted. That way, the demons would be able to develop without dying out as their weakest form. I was tempted to buy that race immediately, as my world was still undeveloped for the most part. However, their cost was 50 points, and I couldn't justify that kind of expense just yet. I'd wait until I had enough points, and if need be I would simply add them to the next world I received. That made me chuckle as I planned for the next world to be a tech world. High-tech demons would certainly be fun to play with. For now, I at least had an idea of some things I could create. Fortunately, the last keeper of Earth was a lazy slob, but he focused on cultural development so that he could get his entertainment. And that same entertainment industry, from books to television shows, could serve as the starting point for my new content. The first thing that I submitted was a race of my own, named the Forgotten. They had a high intelligence and comprehension rating, though low physical abilities. Where they really shined were their unique traits. First was automated memory deletion, a trait I defined as any living creature, the moment they look away from the possessor of this trait, completely forgets their existence. Then came post-hypnotic suggestion, an ability that already existed in the system to implant ideas in targets and bioelectric field to give them the power to generate and manipulate electric currents. All hail the doctor, I thought with a small grin as I submitted the race. Not only would the Forgotten be a good race to develop in a new world alongside another race, it would also be very useful for invasions. If you throw in a few dozen, or even a few hundred, of them during an invasion, you could potentially make the Keeper's own people assassinate him. I wasn't surprised when the race had the starting cost of 75 points, being a fairly expensive sapient species. What did surprise me was that someone almost instantly bought it. Within 5 minutes, I was notified of the sale, and saw that I had 2 notifications waiting for me on the computer. Congratulations, you have earned 2 new achievements. For submitting your own custom content, you earned the Creator Achievement. Plus 20 points. For selling your first custom content, you earned the Salesman Achievement. Plus 15 points. Well, that was an easy 35. No, make that 42 points. It seemed that the system rounded down the royalties, though maybe that would mean it would give me 8 points the next time someone bought the Forgotten. I'd find out eventually. As for the other message, Drillit has purchased the Forgotten. You earned 7 points in royalties. To be honest, I had expected it to take a few weeks for someone to buy the new race, but maybe I got lucky and that guy was browsing just as I posted it. Either way, that brought my total up to 212 points. And, looking back at the bed, I saw that Tara was finally starting to wake up from her nap. With a small smile, I turned to her and asked, "Still mad at me?" There was a low purr to answer me, before she spoke up a long moment later. "Yup." How to bribe a cat. What about if I suggest fish for dinner tonight? I swear, I've never seen anyone move so fast. I couldn't even see her get up from the bed before she was sitting on the floor beside me, looking up with wide eyes. Really? Naya, that would be good. I chuckled at the sudden change in attitude, glad that she was given most of a cat's likes as well as their bad points. What? Even if I don't get hungry, that doesn't mean I don't want yummy food. She looked at me and said with a smile. Alright. Wasn't going to say anything. Besides, I had a question for you. When I said that, she tilted her head in confusion. First, I wanted to ask if there are any benefits to this achievement system aside from the extra points. She thought about that for a moment, and then gave a firm nod. Any achievements you earn get added to your total starting points if you reset a world, so you don't lose them. Though, achievements are divided into 3 different categories. First, you have system achievements, like what you've been earning so far. These can only be earned once, no matter how many worlds you start up. Next are world achievements. These can be earned once per world instance. So, if you raise a world up to get an achievement and then reset it, you will still have the points from that achievement. Some keepers use this method to farm for points by raising a world until right before it is able to participate in the keeper games, and then resetting it. But, world achievements are assigned to the world rather than the keeper, so you only get the extra starting points the next time you reset. The second reset after the achievement won't get them. Also, as you probably guessed, world achievements don't carry over when a new keeper is assigned. Finally, there are personal achievements. These achievements can only be earned while you are descended, and will give you certain buffs along with the points. For example, you could do a lot of manual labor to get an achievement that gives a small boost to strength. Like with system achievements, these can only be earned once per keeper. However, the buff that you gain is permanent, so it is good to have them for defensive battles. I listened to her explanation and nodded. That makes sense. Now, next question. And I'm probably going to regret asking this. Do you have a record of how many people bought the warp drive connection content submitted by one of the previous Earth Keepers? Specifically, during the last Keeper's rule. Hearing that, Tara gave a bitter, knowing smile. Over 1,000. That was one of the reasons why the last companion hated him so much. He had tens of thousands of points, but wasn't willing to spend them because it would push Earth into the level where it could battle in the games. I gave a sad sigh when I heard her answer. Though, that did answer one of my other questions. There were over 1,000 people using tech-based worlds. That meant that there should be at least 2,000 keepers in total, counting the ones that simply decided not to buy it. Oh, right. Someone contacted me and mentioned a Merlin route for raising civilizations, so I had another question. Is it possible to create an identity in the world and have it be my body when I descend, but be on autopilot when I'm not using it? Tara blinked in confusion at that, before a wide grin began showing on her face. Why, no Dale, it's not. Not yet, at least. She added that last bit with a playful wink, and I was really surprised. I mean, why wouldn't someone have thought of that before? Were they too concerned with the possibility of their Auto Merlin destabilizing the world in their absence? Or did it just not occur to anyone? Either way, before anyone else had the chance to get to it first, I submitted the idea to the system, defining it a bit more. The race had to be selected from among the races that the world already had, and it had a normal lifespan for that race. And rather than a feature, this was an entity purchase. Meaning that each time the host body died, the keeper would need to buy it again if they wanted to use it. Though Auto Merlin was a terrible name, so instead I referred to it as World Host. After submitting it, I saw that the cost was listed as 30 points. Not too bad for a single entity purchase. And people will need to buy it repeatedly if they want to use it with a developing world. Though, naturally, it came with a note from the system that achievements and points could not be earned by the host unless the keeper was inhabiting it, and the host could not be added to an invasion force. Lastly, there could only be one host on the world at a time. Seeing that I had successfully submitted it, Tara let out a happy laugh. That should earn us quite a few points in the long run. And it looks like you already submitted a custom race as well. Planning ahead? I shook my head with a light smile. No, just not wanting to be poor. By the way, you said achievement points are carried over for starting points if a world resets. Does that not also count for points earned from the royalties? Tara nodded her head slightly. It does. They are treated like system achievements in that they carry over regardless of how many resets you go through. Consider it that you are refunded all of the points you spent on that world, aside from world achievements. So, if you spend 500 points on a world, but 100 of those were from achievements that your world doesn't have this instance, you only get 400 back. I nodded at that, it was easy enough to remember. Alright. Guess it's time to get back to guiding the world. I said with a small sigh as I tabbed back to the map of Earth. Chapter 6, Mistakes were made and fixed. In the plains of beginning, a red-haired felon was currently instructing other people of various beastkin races. Their goals were obvious as they carried large logs from one point to another. They were making homes, actual wooden shelters. Ardra Firebrand, the leader of this community, led her people according to the instructions which had been whispered to her. It had taken her many seasons to contact all of the families and have them move here, but it was worth it. The beastkin were not incredibly adept at using the strange power which would occasionally appear, a power she herself had faintly grasped. After gathering the various families, she received her reward. This reward appeared to strengthen her body and mind, allowing her to have thoughts and ideas that were previously unknown. And with that intelligence, she became something called a mage, though she had yet to delve into what that meant. What she did know was that she now had the power to lead her people. Yes, her people. Because once the families had gathered, one of the more brutish leaders of the Ursa attempted to take control through force. However, Ardra had been able to deal with this using her newfound strength. She almost felt unstoppable as she clutched the Ursa's throat in her claws, making him beg her to spare his life. And she did. Not because she felt he deserved to live, but because that same voice which had given her so much had told her to. Let him live, child. Show me that I chose correctly. Although the words carried no threat, no mention of punishment, Ardra had still felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of offending her goddess. This goddess which whispered to her, gave her the power to stand at the top of the beastkin races and unify them, and gave her the wisdom to lead them. In her mind, she apologized for what she had almost done, but there was no response. At first, Ardra thought that her goddess was displeased that she had not obeyed sooner, but she quickly discovered that the rest of the beastkin were looking at her with gazes of shock and awe. The Ursa was the most physically powerful of the beast clans, and the Felon were the fastest. They thought she would fight him in speed to make him submit, but instead she completely overpowered him. That truly cemented her position in their minds, and they were willing to join her. Still, Ardra worried for the lack of contact with her goddess for hours, before she was given another message. She nearly cried tears of joy when the gentle voice again spoke to her, telling her how to have her people cut down the great trees of the nearby forests and stack them in such a way as to provide shelter. She knew that she had not been abandoned by her goddess at that point, and again swore to herself to do whatever she could for this mysterious being. Glancing at the screen, I was curious regarding the level of the current leader of Terraria, the one called Ardra Firebrand. "Hey, Terra, what's going on with this?" I called out to the cat girl who was on her way to lounging on the bed again. What's wrong?" she asked lazily, not bothering to turn around. "This Felon, isn't she a bit too abnormal? She's 5 levels higher than the next strongest person in the world right now." I glanced again at the information, and sure enough, she was listed as being level 15, with the next highest being a level 10 human. "Ah, Ardra, you mean? She did a pretty big quest, and that was the reward that the system gave for it." Terra shrugged her shoulders as she laid down on the bed. "I sent her to unify the beast clans, and that was a quest that affected her entire race's fate. I wouldn't have been surprised if she got a special title or class from that." Suddenly, she furrowed her brows as if thinking of something. "Though, this will make stronger monsters start appearing ahead of schedule. They should still be limited to the same general area as Ardra, so it won't be too much of a disaster. More so because she'll probably die in a few years from getting sick or something. I figure, there will probably be a new Beast King by the time you stop the next fast-forward cycle." She shrugged indifferently as she said that, as if it didn't really matter to her. That kind of attitude made me frown for some reason. I thought back to what Elcahest said about being involved as much as possible. I knew that there was no way around the Felon dying at the end of their lifespan, because they didn't have any kind of longevity. Still, talking about death so casually was disturbing. And even if I wanted to interfere, the world was still too primitive for me to really affect it yet. Still, I wanted to help out somehow, so I pulled up the menu for the system. Maybe there was something I could give them, so that they would have an easier time. I still had 212 points, so it's not like I had no options. It was at this point that I noticed a rather large problem, something I overlooked when I was creating the races. This is totally unbalanced. I slapped my forehead as I noticed the mistake. Out of all the races, only the elves had a real advantage, and that was their increased magical affinity. As for the other races, they were just given tweak stats to balance things out so that they wouldn't cost anything extra. Shaking my head, I looked at the options and began assigning them different perks to balance things out, make life a bit easier for those that didn't have such buffs. Since the elves had the second level of magical affinity for 20 points, I set that number as my goal for the other 7 races. 140 points in total, this will put a big dent in my wallet. For the beast races, there was one easy option to pick: enhanced senses for 5 points. For the wolf tribe, I even gave them the second level of it for an extra 10 points. These were obvious things that the races should have had from the start, but I just didn't consider them. I mean, it's common sense that a beastman has enhanced senses, so why even think about it normally? After I was done with the beast races, I went to the others and gave them similarly obvious traits. For instance, giving the dwarves a craft affinity, or the halflings stealth affinity. With humans, I wasn't really sure what I could give them without breaking the normal human mold. In the end, I assigned them 2 levels of weapon affinity. 72 points left, I should save them for now in case I need something later. I nodded my head, before looking back to Terra again. How long will it take for these changes to kick in? I imagine it won't happen overnight, right? She smiled lightly from the bed, without opening her eyes much. It'll take a few generations, depending on the amount changed. Most of them might not even notice the changes ever happened. I mean, dwarves aren't really crafting anything yet, and the humans aren't using any weapons aside from sticks and stones. I nodded slightly at that, understanding what she meant. Makes sense. Could potentially change a race entirely like that, and wouldn't be good for the entire race to mutate all at once. Terra nodded her head in response to that, agreeing. Right, right. So, what now? Fish. As she asked that last part, her ears perked up, tail raising slightly to show her interest. I could only laugh at that. Fine, we can have fish now. I got up and moved towards the kitchen, with Tara prancing happily behind me. It did feel a bit weird eating now, because I wasn't actually hungry, but I did enjoy the taste of fish. Apparently, since Tara still had the records of the previous Earth, she could create whatever delicacies she wanted. When I asked why she didn't do this without me needing to suggest it, she just pouted cutely and said that it was more fun to eat together. There really wasn't any reason to argue that, so we just ate together for a bit before heading back to the room. This time, I decided to let Tara enjoy her nap while I took another look at the forums. I was looking for things that would prove helpful to my developing world. In short, I wanted a strategy guide. And there were a surprising amount. How to use the monster mayhem tactic, breeding a better creature race, cheap alternatives for big benefit, and even Merlin's rulebook. These were all thread names in the guides section of the forums, and when I looked through them I saw that they were left just vague enough to make the keepers work on their own. For example, the monster mayhem tactic simply suggested sending powerful monsters as your invasion force in the games instead of a group of heroes, but did not suggest what kind of monsters. Likewise, breeding a better creature race suggested a starting creature with the adaptive breeder perk and how it worked, but did not specify any suggested powers to give to it through the breeding process. By the way, adaptive breeder was just as it sounded. It made it so that a creature could mate with any other kind of creature, and the offspring would have traits of both parents. That was obviously a way to build a master race if used right, but at the same time weaknesses could also be inherited. The thread I was interested in was Merlin's rulebook. This was a simple strategy guide on how to run the Merlin strategy, which was basically the story of King Arthur. This strategy consists of a few important steps. First, there is you, the keeper. Now, naturally there won't be any single individual in your world that can stand up to you, but you shouldn't let them know that. If they do, then it would be them trying to put you in charge of the kingdom, not the other way around. Next is the talented individual. As a keeper, if you focus on any specific being in your world, you will be able to roughly gauge their innate talent. This talent does not consider gender, location, or social status and merely suggests how far that person can go with their own effort. In almost every world, people with high innate talents are rare, so you will need to find one in a suitable position. The time period for this should be no earlier than roughly 50 million world inhabitants, and they should have a fairly stable culture. Now, once you have the individual, you should prepare multiple dangerous quests for them. The best option is to create relics ahead of time, and make sure that they are lost, ensuring that there is a record of what the quest is about in the culture's history. The purpose of the Merlin strategy is to make this young hero fight these quests to the most of his ability, forcing out his latent talent and building his fame. In the meantime, you will stay in the background, and only interfere if he is about to die. The less impact you have on his quests, the greater the results will be. This was a fairly short guide, but I felt like it had a great amount of information in it. For instance, the bit about measuring talent. I had never observed one of the inhabitants of my world closely enough to notice. Pulling up the map, I zoomed in on Ardra again. This time, I squinted my eyes in focus while concentrating on her. Sure enough, a hazy green cloud appeared around her, stretching out nearly 10 feet. When I did the same thing with another felon passing by carrying a wooden log, the cloud appeared again, but was much smaller. This felon's cloud extended out maybe 1 foot, and had a hazy red color to it. Great. Now I just need to learn what these mean. I'll ask Tara about that when she wakes up. Out of curiosity, I went to the Elven Kingdom and focused on the current queen. Her aura extended out about 8 feet, but was golden in color. Really wish I knew what that meant. On the bright side, I had a message notification pop up at the corner of the screen. You have sold 2 units of World Host, earning 6 points. Good start. Now sell a few thousand more, and I'll be happy. Chapter 7, Keeper's Descent. For now, I had less than 100 points to spend, so there wasn't much I could do in the admin room. Instead, I had a different idea, one which would only be possible while the development of this world is still early. I began making preparations by looking over my map and searching for the perfect area. What I wanted was a wide space with only low-level monsters. The stronger monsters were all being centered around the budding civilizations, so it wasn't a very hard request. After all, the planet was basically the size of Jupiter, by my best guess. And, with only a few small colonies on the planet, the vast majority was uninhabited. Once I had the perfect area picked out, I decided to wait for a while, at least until Tara woke up. Roughly an hour later, Tara began stirring, rolling around in the bed before slowly rising with a yawn. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait too long for her nap to finish, because I wanted to ask her some questions. Tara, mind if I ask you a few things real quick, again? She looked over to me with sleepy eyes, but gave a small smile and a nod. Sure, what is it, Dale? Well, first of all, I learned how to see the innate talent of someone, but I don't know what the aura size and colors mean. Could you clear that up? She gave a long yawn while stretching her arms, followed by a light shrug. The color represents their greatest talent, and the size is how good they are at it. Closing her eyes for a few moments, she gave a small smile. Looks like you looked at Ardra and Rin, so let's use those two as an example. Ardra's aura is a dense green, meaning that her talent lies with nature. That could mean hunting, agriculture, anything like that. Now, on the other hand, Rin's aura is a brilliant gold. That means that she is a natural-born leader. You could say she was born to be a queen. Red auras mark battle ability, blue auras mark magic, yellow auras mark crafting or creativity, and so on. If you come across one later that you don't understand, just ask me and I'll let you know. She says with a happy smile, rubbing the sleep from her eyes and moving over to walk to me. I see. What is my aura like? I asked, curious. I doubted that I had any special auras like Ardra or the Elf Queen. Tara tilted her head curiously, before shrugging her shoulders and stepping back. Next, she seemed to squint in my direction, before looking off to either side. Yellow aura about 5 feet thick. You could be a really good idea man if you tried. She finished with a satisfied nod. Well, that definitely wasn't the worst evaluation, I suppose. At least it wasn't only a small battle aura or something. Well, anyways. Next question, after descending, how long does it take to come back to the admin room? This was the question that I really needed an answer to. The last keeper died because he couldn't ascend fast enough, so I needed to know how long it took. Tara blinked, a bit in surprise, before smiling. It doesn't take long. You just have to pull up the system menu and select the Return to Administration Room option. Most people can do that in just a couple of seconds, so there isn't much of a problem. That surprised me. I was expecting it to be a bit longer of a process than that. Was the previous keeper just panicking and unable to find the button, then? Well, no use really worrying about it. Alright. Well, I plan to go down to the world so that I can get a feel for the combat and properly earn the classes. Wanted to wait until you were awake, so that you could watch out for me. Never hurts to have a goddess watching over your shoulder. Tara froze for a long moment, furrowing her brows. Eventually, she nodded her head slowly, but her body was visibly more stiff now. Just be careful. I'll keep an eye on things from up here, and if things get too bad, I can go down and buy you some time to ascend. I nodded with a smile, reaching out to gently grab her hand and placed my lips against it to comfort her. I'll be careful. I chose an area with only weak monsters, so I should be able to farm a few levels without worry. If I understand the system right, I can unlock classes and spells that my people don't know, as long as I properly earn them through the system. She nodded her head at my assumption, confirming it. And, since I assigned the conditions for unlocking the classes, I naturally knew what they were. Even the ones that hadn't been unlocked yet. Well, granted I forgot a few, but there were really a lot. Okay. But really, be careful. The world is too new, there isn't anyone capable of crafting weapons yet, so we can't give you any equipment. You'll only be able to equip yourself with rags. If you want anything better, you'll have to make it yourself after you descend. I nodded again, having already taken that into account. I know. That's why I wanted to wait until you were up. I gave a light chuckle, before turning to the screen. There, I right-clicked on the bookmark location. Edit location. Spawn. Kill. Trigger event. Descend. I moved my mouse over the bottom option, and chose it. Please visualize the body you would like to descend as. Note, only species available to your world may be used. Naturally, I just chose the body I was already using, though maybe with a little more muscle mass. I was going to be fighting, so I didn't want to be unfit after all. Also, like Tara said, I did give myself some rags to cover up with. Body verified. Human race selected. Beginning descent. May you work for the betterment of your world, Keeper. I felt my body being bathed in a warm blue light, before I felt the warm breeze on my skin. Opening my eyes, I saw that I was standing on a wide grassland. In the distance to the east and north, I could see a long mountain range, while to the west there was a large lake just beyond the horizon. Everything in between was grassland, with the occasional tall tree. Giving a small nod, I opened up my character window. Status. Name. Dale Mitchell. Race. Human Keeper. Health. 10/10 180/180. Mana. 10/10 64/64. Strength. 510. Ki. 10/10 34/34. Stamina. 510. Intelligence. 7/9. Dexterity. 5/7. Wisdom. 4/8. Luck. 5/5. Charm. 4/4. Class list. Druid 03. Farmer 01. Hunter 04. Leader 02. Mage 05. Monk 03. Priest 03. Scholar 01. Scout 02. Shaman 01. Spirit Tamer 02. Warrior 012. I furrowed my brow as I looked at the information, particularly the bits in parenthesis. It was at this time that I heard a soft voice whispering into my mind, one that I was very familiar with. Your personal stats are marked normally. Everything in parenthesis is what you get as a keeper. If you want to get stronger than your keeper status, you'll need to raise your levels beyond the rest of the world. I gave a small smile hearing Terra's voice again. Since she was a goddess, it was an easy matter for her to speak to me like she could any other citizen. So, first mission. I got down on one knee and closed my eyes. O Terra, goddess of fate, I seek guidance to learn your ways. This was one of the requirements for the priest class, to commune with a deity and receive a quest. I heard a small giggle in my ear, followed by the same voice as before. Very well, traveler. Place my image into the world, so that others may know it. Do this and be rewarded. Quest received. Class quest, priest class quest. The goddess of fate has asked that you place her image in the world, so that others may gaze upon it. How you choose to do this is your decision, but the quality of the work will determine the strength of the reward. Reward, priest class. Bonus reward, please Terra with your efforts for extra experience in the priest class. I nodded my head to accept the quest. At the same time, a vivid image appeared in my mind of Terra standing proudly among the clouds. Her usually nude frame wrapped in a white toga, the sun directly behind her to make her red hair and furry ears appear as if they are glowing. I'd need to work on this quest later, once I had the ability to create something in her image. Next up, the easiest class to get, the mage class. For this one, all I needed to do was detect my mana. I had already done this once before in the admin room, so I was familiar with the process. Closing my eyes, I directed my senses inward, searching for that warm energy. It took me a considerable amount of time to actually find it, because what was once a bright glow of blue light within me had become little more than a spark. This is likely because of me no longer having the large mana pools of the admin room. However, I was eventually able to detect it. Mage class unlocked. Fire spell unlocked. Smiling slightly, I opened my character window, and saw that both my mana and health had improved. For my mana, it went from 10 to 17 when I unlocked the class. And for health, it went up to 15. The calculations for the stats were a bit different compared to most game systems. With this one, health, mana, and ki were based on relevant classes. For example, health is based on your class levels and your stamina stat. Ki and mana each require certain classes to unlock and advance, so they are naturally harder to do so. Furthermore, stats are awarded based on class levels, but you don't get to choose what stats you earn. The strongest class, the hero, gains 1 point in everything every 5 levels. On the other hand, the mage class only gains 1 point in intelligence every 2 levels, and 1 in wisdom every 5 levels. Of course, stats could also be raised manually, by training them. Now, I could probably tackle a monster way above my level and earn the hero class, thanks to my keeper powers. However, I wasn't quite ready to take on the stronger monsters yet when I hadn't even tested myself against the small fry. And besides, leveling up the hero class is way more trouble than it's worth, since you have to constantly fight enemies higher level than yourself. Anyways, the next class I want to get for myself is warrior, which just requires me to defeat something in melee. For this reason, I looked around the grassland I deposited myself into. There shouldn't be any monsters higher than level 3 within a few miles, so I wasn't worried about my own safety. After roughly 10 minutes of searching, I found a small, white, adorable ball of fluffness. This was, no matter how you looked at it, a rabbit. The only thing different about this rabbit was that it had a small, sharp horn on its forehead. This was the lowest level monster on the planet, a level 1 horned rabbit. Their only specialty was speed, and using their horn as a spear to charge at people. Seeing that this was the perfect chance for me to get the warrior class, I walked towards the rabbit carefully. Unlike normal rabbits, the horned rabbit is aggressive. It won't hesitate to attack anyone that approaches it, and will only flee if it feels its life is in danger. As such, as soon as it heard me walking over, it turned and glared at me. Now, with my keeper levels, there is no way that the horned rabbit would willingly challenge me. However, the only thing that could be sensed from my body was my normal level. Otherwise, forget this rabbit, there wouldn't be a single monster on the planet right now that would let me fight it. So, it did what it naturally would. It charged at me. With its head lowered, its spear-like horn was aimed directly towards me. Although I knew it was moving fast, it did not seem to be a speed I was incapable of following. Again, this was most likely because of my keeper boost to dexterity, however small it was. That did not mean I was able to get out of the way in time, though. -2. I felt a sharp sting in my leg as the red number appeared over my head, followed by a large red bar displaying my overall health. Youch! I winced when I looked down, seeing a shallow gash where the rabbit had scraped me. I had managed to turn my body slightly, but not enough to fully evade. Looking behind me, the rabbit was already turning back towards me for a second run, apparently oblivious to the health bar over my head that would have showed it I was far stronger than it could sense. Thankfully, it did not possess that level of intelligence. Instead of dodging this time, I shot my hand down lower, aiming to grab at the rabbit's horn before it could pierce me. -4. Another damage number appeared over my head as I latched onto something. Unfortunately, my hand had been just a bit slow, and what I grabbed was the rabbit's neck instead of its horn. This meant that its horn managed to cleanly pierce into my leg. I tried my best to keep my pain off my face while the red bar above my head shrank slightly. Instead, I strengthened my grip, taking advantage of my keeper's strength to crush the rabbit's spine. -15. This time, the red number appeared over the rabbit, and the health bar that appeared depleted itself almost instantly. Knowing what was about to happen, I quickly pulled the dead rabbit's horn out of my leg just in time for the wound to close. Warrior class unlocked. Punch ability unlocked. Chapter 8, When Spirits Walk the Land. Okay. Got that taken care of. Should I keep grinding for a bit, or work on more classes? I thought curiously to myself. If I unlock more classes, my stats will slowly rise and I will get more varied abilities. However, grinding one class will mean that I will get a sharp increase of stats but fewer powers. For now, let's take care of the spirit tamer, since I have a dead monster at my feet. Out of curiosity, I decided to ask Terra a question. "Oh great goddess of fate, I beseech you for advice." There was another light giggle in my ear before the voice of the catgirl goddess spoke. "Yes, go ahead. How long do the spirits of the dead remain behind?" "Important knowledge, I'd say." After a brief pause, she answered. "Currently, there is no afterlife system in place. So, the spirits will forever remain after death. They may thin over time, or manifest as undead, but they are currently unable to depart from the world. That seems kind of sad." I furrowed my brows as I thought about the implications of that. Sure, I might not have believed in much of an afterlife before this whole keeper thing started, but actually knowing that there is a higher power at work changes things. Especially when I am that higher power. How much do afterlife systems cost? The response this time was much faster. They can be anywhere from 50 to 200 points, depending on the system chosen. I nodded my head at that. Once I get some more income, I'll look into that system. For now, there's not enough to really worry about it yet. And besides, the ones I could afford right now would likely not be very good. Anyways, back to business. Guiding the mana into my eyes, I looked down at the rabbit beneath me. As I did so, I saw a faint white smoke clinging to the dead form. Looking around the grassland, I saw the same kind of smoke rising from various parts of the ground, likely indicating the more recent past deaths that occurred here. Spirit Tamer class unlocked. See Spirit's ability unlocked. Well, that was easy. Let's see if I can take this a step further. I took a deep breath and tried to will the spirit out of the rabbit. If I could successfully extract a spirit, I should be able to gain a considerable amount of experience for this class. Unfortunately, no matter how I focused, the spirit would not budge. And I knew it was no use asking Tara, since she wasn't allowed to tell me game mechanics that hadn't been unlocked by the people yet. So, I could only experiment randomly until I figured it out on my own. Since mana in the eyes lets me see spirits, maybe mana in the hands lets me grab them? I mused silently to myself before trying it. Just like how I used it to see the spirit of the rabbit, I guided the mana to my hand and reached down. Sure enough, I managed to grab a bit of the white smoke, which seemed to be struggling to escape my grip. When I pulled the spirit up, a translucent image of a horned rabbit gradually floated up from the corpse. As soon as it was fully separated from its body, the spirit began struggling more violently, even seeming to fade away slightly. Out of curiosity, I let go of the spirit and watched it move back to the body, latching onto it as if it were afraid to leave. Spirit Tamer has leveled up. Okay, well, that's a start, but I won't be able to get the next class ability until level 4 or 5, so I had to keep going. Thankfully, mana regenerated fairly quickly outside of combat. There was no passive combat Reagan, but otherwise mana could recover rapidly. Health, on the other hand. You needed to get healed with magic, level up, or wait for natural recovery. Once again, I pulled the rabbit up from its body, hoping to follow the same pattern as before. I drew a strand of mana to my mouth in an attempt to communicate with the spirit. Stop struggling, I said in a gentle tone. However, much to my surprise, the rabbit let out an almost audible screech, its astral body ripped to shreds in my hand. I was left there, blinking, and looking at my now empty hand. The fuck? Seriously, what? Since mana in the hands let me grab it, did mana in the voice count as an attack instead of communication? Then, how was I supposed to tame these spirits? Spirit Tamer has leveled up. I felt my eye twitch slightly, not having wanted to level up this way. I want a spirit beast, and by Terra I will have one. Standing up, I looked for another creature, and a few minutes later found one. This was a level 2 razor boar. Unlike the rabbit, it was slow, but with thick skin and strong, sharp tusks. Too lazy to bother with fighting it in melee, I decided to test out my magic. Now, this is where the class abilities come into play. I hadn't really experimented with them before, but it was easy to use once I tried. As soon as I focused on the fire spell, the diagram appeared in my mind. It was a strong, unshakable image, and I wasn't able to alter the foundation of it if I tried. All I could do was fill in the center, design the shape that the spell would take. Holding out my hand towards the boar, who now noticed my presence, I drew a straight line in my mind. Once that was done, my mana surged beyond my control, filling the pattern and triggering the spell. A small fire burned in front of my hand before shooting off like a bullet to collide with the boar. -10. A red bar appeared above the boar's head, which seemed roughly half full after the spell's effect ended. The boar let out a mad roar, its eyes seeming to glow as it charged at me. I tried to fire the spell again, but discovered something rather unexpected. Cooldown remaining, 0.52. The countdown quickly ended, and half a second later I activated the spell again. While jumping back, I formed another straight line in the center of the diagram that appeared in my mind, just as the boar arrived at my previous location. When the fire struck it this time, the last of its health faded away and it fell to the ground in a smoking heap. So, system abilities have a cooldown associated with them. I furrowed my brows again and punched at the air 2 times in rapid succession. Then, I activated the warrior ability punch and found my body adopting a more natural form, punching out with more power than I normally could muster. However, as soon as I was done, I tried to do it again. Cooldown remaining, 0.31. So, half a second cooldown between punches and maybe a 1 or 2 second cooldown for the fire spell. However, there was a preset form for system abilities, which was the equivalent of having been trained to do so manually. So, as someone that never got into any real fights before, the punch ability was stronger than my normal punches. Once I was done sidetracking myself, I manually guided the mana to my eyes again, so that I could look at this boar spirit. It was notably thicker than that of the rabbit, and I was able to pull it out of its body just the same. However, when it was outside of its body, the boar spirit seemed to enter some sort of rage, struggling until it broke free of my hand and then dropping to the ground. I watched as the spirit began running in random directions, letting out silent roars at anything that it could and apparently oblivious to my own presence. So, it probably hates me for killing it. Only natural, right? But it can't see me, so it just charges recklessly. Then, at this point, I tried a different method to connect with the spirit, closer to the path of using natural energy. Rather than using mana, I tried to send my will out directly to the rampaging ghost. This was easier said than done. For about 5 minutes, I focused on it as it ran back and forth, before suddenly it seemed to freeze in place. Afterwards, it slowly turned to face me, that same anger in its eyes. Okay. I guess I made the connection. Now to tame it. How do? I shouted in my mind as the boar spirit began to charge directly at me. Well, it definitely knows where I am now. I focused on it again, and faintly felt as if there was a wall blocking my mind from touching the boar. And what do we do when we run into a wall? Go around it. Screw that, blast right through. Relying on my enhanced keeper stats, I put all my focus on smashing that barrier that stopped my mind from connecting with the boar. I heard a small cracking sound in my head, and right as its charge reached me, it felt like something shattered. The boar leapt into the air as if to tackle my chest, but simply phased into me. When I spun around to keep an eye on it, the boar had seemingly vanished. Successfully contracted level 2 razor boar. Stage 1. Oh. Well. Now what? I looked around myself curiously, before a thought occurred to me. Closing my eyes, I sent my senses inward. If I'm right. There it is. I spotted a faint wisp of ethereal energy inside my body, the same energy that had been identified as spiritual energy by Terra. And when I focused on it more, it seemed to take the shape of a boar. Though, having come this far, I was completely incapable of doing anything with it. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't call that boar spirit back out of me. And since there was not a cooldown timer or anything appearing, it didn't seem to be a system restriction. I'll have to figure that out later. Name, Dale Mitchell. Race, human. Keeper. Health, 28/28. 184/184. Mana, 34/34. 64/64. Strength, 5. 10. Key, 0 zeros. 33/33. Stamina, 5. 10. Intelligence, 7. 9. Dexterity, 5. 7. Wisdom, 8. 11. Luck, 5. Charm, 4. Class list. Druid, 0. 3. Farmer, 0. 1. Hunter, 0. 4. Leader, 0. 2. Mage, 1. 5. Monk, 0. 3. Priest, 0. 3. Scholar, 0. 1. Scout, 0. 2. Shaman, 0. 1. Spirit Tamer, 3. 3. Warrior, 1. 12. I nodded my head happily at the changes. Although it wasn't much, I now had more health, mana, and it seemed that my wisdom had increased by a point as well. Still, compared to my keeper abilities, my power hadn't changed at all. But that was only natural, as I had just barely been grinding for an hour. For most people currently, they would rarely encounter an enemy, and will probably use the system abilities when they do to defeat it. Seeing as I didn't level up my mage class when I defeated the boar, you probably don't gain much experience when you fight with the system powers. Well, anything else I should get before I head back? I thought about it for a few minutes and decided I might as well go back to the admin room now. I could come down and train anytime I wanted, but as it stands there are no creatures here strong enough to really test myself. Not that being safe is a bad thing, of course. Opening up the system menu with a thought, I navigated to the exit button and let myself be enveloped by the blue light again. I had definitely learned some things after descending this time. Chapter 9, The 72. As I returned to the admin room, I felt a warm feeling surround my body and 2 fleshy lumps pressing against my chest. Welcome back, Dale. The Catgirl goddess spoke in a happy voice, obviously relieved to see me back. I smiled to her, opening my eyes and reaching up to pet her hair. I'll probably go back to train more later. I still have a quest I need to finish, right? I chuckled lightly as she gave me a small nod. Alright, but you still have to be careful. Not just for your own sake. Tara said something rather ominous there, didn't she? What? I looked at her confused. I mean, I could understand if me being in danger would be bad for the world, since it would mean a full reset with a new keeper. Well, your real level. If it gets higher than the current strongest person, stronger monsters will begin to spawn. You don't have to worry about that if it's just your keeper level. But once you actually train yourself that high, it will be a problem. Ah. I hadn't considered that possibility. I see. I'll have to take things in moderation, then. Currently, my real level was only 5 or so there was no risk of upsetting the balance of the world quite yet. By the way, did anything happen while I was gone? Tara thought about that for a moment before giving a small nod. There were 5 more purchases of the world host. Elkahest also sent a message asking to meet up whenever it was convenient for you. Aside from that, there weren't any developments on Earth. Cool, so 5 more hosts sold. That should be another 15 points, then. I nodded my head at that. Alright. Before we get started on anything else, can you help me find a few of the afterlife systems? Even if I can't afford them, I'd like to make a plan for the future. Tara nods with a small smile on her face when I ask that, and a blue window appears in front of me. Heaven and Hell, this system establishes 2 small storage areas for deceased souls within the metaphysical realm. Whenever a soul is ready to move on, the keeper or an appointed god will judge their events in life to determine their placement. Those deemed virtuous souls will be granted a blissful afterlife as their reward, and those deemed sinful will be condemned to eternal torture. This reward or punishment can end at any time when the keeper or relevant god determines that a soul is fit to be given another chance at life, and at that point the keeper or relevant god can determine the circumstances surrounding the birth of this new life. 50 points. Cycle of Reincarnation. This system enters your world in the great cycle of reincarnation, shared through many keeper worlds. Whenever a soul with a strong innate talent dies, there is a chance for it to be reborn either in your world or another in this cycle. It will retain fragmented memories of its past life, and if those memories are sufficient, the soul will be able to regain its former power, should the new life's world be compatible with those powers. 60 points. Hall of Champions, a defensive system put in place to offer an emergency fighting force in the event of impending disaster. With this system, every soul above a sufficient level of strength is entered into the Hall of Champions, where they may feast, fight, and celebrate for an eternity, or until they are called for one final battle. Each soul can only be called this way once, but there is no limit to the number of souls that can be called at a time. Souls not qualified to enter the Hall of Champions will be consumed as fuel to maintain the dimension. 150 points. Astral Plane. This system creates a second, spiritual world within your domain. Whenever a soul dies in the material plane, it may be transferred to the astral plane to live a new life. Likewise, when a soul dies in the astral plane, it may be reborn in the material plane with its memories erased. 200 points. Soul Disposal, a quick and easy system, which disposes of souls after a set amount of time has passed since their death. 50 points. While these aren't the only systems available, they are the ones that are more popular. Tara explained as I read through the list. Why is Heaven and Hell so cheap? It sounds like something that should cost at least 100 points. I asked curiously, unable to figure that part out. That's because of the need for a dedicated judge role. If a keeper personally takes that task and has to oversee every death for his entire world, he would have no time to develop the world. Otherwise, he would need to spend points to acquire a separate judge to do the work for him. That makes sense, I suppose. Personally, I was torn between the Heaven and Hell system and the Hall of Champions. The cycle of reincarnation sounds good, but really seems more like a trap. If a malicious keeper raised their world's talents right, they could probably make it so that the reincarnated individuals hold absolute loyalty to their original world and cause chaos after being reincarnated. So, next I looked through a list of options for the judge role. There were actually a lot of choices, including preset gods, devils, and even a court of souls. However, there was one option which caught my eye the most. Lemageddon and Shemampharask. This is a system of 72 angels and 72 demons, each with their own specialty, who oversee the realms of heaven and hell. It is their task to judge the souls of those who pass away in the world, and then carry out the punishment or reward. They will also make suggestions to the keeper or assigned god whenever a powerful soul is ready to be given another life. Although these angels and demons have no physical form, it is possible for those that have passed through their care to commune with them. In doing so, they may establish the angels or demons as a source of divine power, should such be possible in your world. The keeper may limit the influence that the 72 angels and demons have on the living through the system settings. 100 points. While I hadn't heard the name Shemamfarast before, I was at least somewhat familiar with the Lemmigeddon. Also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon, it was a fairly well-known book, supposedly associated with demonology in the earth I was raised in. Though, I can't say I know the details of it too well. Anyways, I ended up choosing to go for that option. Not because of nostalgia or anything, but because of cost effectiveness. Any of the other preset options would require at least 50 points, and have only 1 or 2 entities. This may be a 100-point system, but contains nearly 150 entities. Furthermore, it offers a new kind of power to the world. I nodded my head after having made my decision and closed the system interface. I would need 150 points in order to purchase that, and I was not ready for that yet. There were still a few achievements I would need to earn before I could afford it. Turning towards Terra, I brought up a different subject. Did Alcahest happen to mention what he wanted? Before, he had offered to let me join his guild, so I figured it probably had something to do with that. However, Terra gave me a different answer than I was expecting. He said that there is a meeting of keepers happening in a few weeks, and wanted to let you join in. Earth hasn't been represented in a long time, so he offered to go over the rules and benefits of joining before the meeting itself. I raised my eyebrows in surprise upon hearing that. A meeting of keepers? Is that something official? Terra simply gave a smile, shaking her head. No, this is something they probably set up for themselves. While there is an official gathering time for keepers, it only applies to those that are advanced enough to participate in the games. We likely won't be ready for the next one, so I didn't bother to tell you about it. Ah. Is it important? She shrugged lightly in response. Not particularly. You could consider it like the forums, a way for keepers to meet and exchange ideas face to face in a peaceful environment. There are games that you can enter, either with yourself or with champions from your world, and compete to earn points. However, attendance is definitely not mandatory, and there is no real penalty for being absent. I nodded in understanding at that, then made a bitter smile. Put us at each other's throats with the Keeper Games, and then have us all meet for a festival peacefully. This system really can't make up its mind. Terra simply gave me a knowing smile at that, not saying anything. Well, no use worrying over it right now. Like she said, I was still a long ways away from being able to take part in any of that. Right now, my own world was just getting started. I gave another look to the computer before speaking. I'll do a bit more training before I visit Alcahest, then. I want to figure out how this Spirit Tamer class works, and maybe unlock another class. She nodded, patting me on the shoulder as she let out a slight sigh. Alright. I can't give you any advice about that, but I can tell you something. She leaned forward, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. If you can't figure it out yourself, the system unlocks the ability you want at level 5 of Spirit Tamer. That's the most I can do for you with that. I grinned knowingly, accepting that answer. Was still more than I was hoping for. Alright. Then, while I'm gone, can you let Alcahest know that we'll be meeting in a couple of days? I shouldn't take long to get a couple more levels down on the surface, at most a couple hours, but that will give me plenty of time to relax after I get back. Terra easily accepted that, and I went back down to the world again. For now, I want to use only system abilities, except for the Spirit Tamer class. That way, I don't carelessly level other classes. I nodded to myself while looking around for more targets. Since I spawned in the same location as before, it was still a pretty sparsely populated area. It took me a full 5 minutes to find something that was not treated as a level 0 lifeform. And this was another horned rabbit. Well, let's just get this over with. I aimed my hand at the rabbit from a distance, and chose to use the fire spell in my mind. When the diagram appeared in my head, I drew a cone shape. Horned rabbits were fast, so a straight shot or a punch would most likely miss, and improvising would get me more levels than I wanted for now. -8. There was a high-pitched scream from the rabbit as it was suddenly engulfed in flames, before it turned and charged at me. Unfortunately for the rabbit, fire is not just an instant attack, at least not when something catches on fire. And, since this was a cone attack, a large area had caught on fire. -3. I watched the health bar slowly draining as the horned rabbit ran through the flames to try to reach me. Was it thinking that it should at least make me join it in death? Well, That wasn't likely to happen if I had any say. By the time the rabbit reached me, it had only a sliver of health remaining and its speed had been greatly lessened due to its pain. Killing it at this point was as easy as taking a step back and letting the fire damage finish its work. -2. Just like that, the horned rabbit let out a pitiful cry and collapsed on the ground in front of me. As I had expected, I did not receive any notification of an increase in level, so I knelt down and began the process of extracting the rabbit's spirit again. This time, the rabbit's spirit did not seem to want to return to its body, but rather desperately struggled to break free so that it could run away from me. But, would I really let it get away so easily? Keeping a firm grasp on its neck, I prevented its escape while sending my will to meet it. Unlike the boar, this frightened rabbit offered almost no resistance before its mental wall crumbled. Once that happened, its terrified eyes grew lifeless and it slowly began to dissipate, turning into a formless mass of white smoke that merged with the hand holding it. Successfully contracted level 1 horned rabbit. Stage 1. I could only give a sigh as the rabbit merged with me. Searching my energies, I found that it now existed alongside the boar, the two spirits motionless within me. Maybe I can feed one to the other. When the idea occurred to me, I naturally had to try it. Although I couldn't coax the boar out of me, I might be able to make it interact with another spirit. As such, I connected my mind to the spirit of the boar and ordered it to consume the rabbit spirit. That's when things got weird. The boar spirit's eyes seemed to glow red as it turned to look at the motionless rabbit. Its body broke down into smoke, which spread out in all directions within the area I was watching and then converged on the rabbit. Even as parts of it broke off and faded into nothing, the rabbit made neither a sound nor a movement, right up until the end. With the job done, the boar spirit reformed just as motionless as it was before. However, it seemed slightly different. Its legs looked like they had gotten thicker, while its tusks had become sharper. Level 2 razor boar consumed level 1 horned rabbit. Dexterity plus 0.5. Spirit tamer has leveled up. Okay. That is probably not what I wanted to do. Is that a way to evolve spirits by making them feed on each other? Still interesting. Chapter 10, Tame the Beast Within. Now that I had the possibly mutated boar spirit, I still had to figure out how to bring it out and fight for me. This was probably the most important feature for me out of all of the different classes. Just think, with my keeper stats, I will be able to compete with even the strongest creatures in the world. Then, if I defeat those creatures, I could even add them to my own personal army to use as a fighting force in an invasion. So again, I looked around, but instead of finding a new monster to subdue, I was aiming for something different. With the warm glow of mana flooding my eyes, I once more looked at the white smoke rising up from the ground, the spirits of the creatures that already died. I had no way to immediately tell what the spirits had once been without looking more closely, but there was no reason it should be anything stronger than what I encountered previously. Walking over to the nearest column of smoke, I found myself standing under one of the larger trees in the area. No doubt whatever had died here properly became fertilizer for this tree, but now I have another use for it. Once again wrapping my hands in mana, I grasped onto the smoke and pulled. What appeared was a very vague form of a large quadruped, coming up roughly to my hips with its fat body. A boar, maybe? I thought to myself, as the spirit was far too misshapen to properly identify it. No matter, I once again underwent the process of contracting the spirit. This one did not seem to possess any rage or lingering emotions, and the mental wall between us was breached in but a moment. With that done, the spirit dispersed into gas, which slowly drifted into my body. Naturally, I looked inside of myself when this process was over and found a second boar spirit. Though, this one was far more blurred and indistinct than the one I have been raising. Successfully contracted level 2 razor boar, stage 1. As such, there was only one thing to do. Devour, I commanded the stronger spirit, which once again assaulted its neighbor. This time, rather than becoming smoke to surround and consume it, the boar spirit directly charged over and started ripping chunks out of its victim with its horns. Once the chunks were separated, they merged with the boar until there was only one spirit remaining inside of me. Level 2 razor boar consumed level 2 razor boar. Stamina plus 0.2. Unfortunately, there was no notification of leveling up, but I couldn't really expect to get a level every time I did something related to the class. Also, the bonus this time was smaller than what I had gotten from the rabbit, despite it being a higher level spirit. Was that because it was a much older one? I couldn't be sure, so I decided to go to the next closest column of smoke and repeat this process. The spirit this time was even more vague, appearing as an amorphous blob that came up to my knees. From its size and width, I could only assume it used to be a rabbit. Either way, as they say, get in my belly. Focusing my will on the misshapen ghost, I shattered what little defense it had while it sat there unmoving. As happened before, this spirit turned into a vacant white smoke which slowly flew into my body. And again, I ordered the boar spirit to consume it. Successfully contracted level 0 normal rabbit, stage 1. Level 2 razor boar consumed level 0 normal rabbit. No growth. Spirit tamer has leveled up. Contract spirit ability has been unlocked. Feed spirit ability has been unlocked. Absorb spirit ability has been unlocked. Summon spirit ability has been unlocked. I was suddenly assaulted by a barrage of blue windows after feeding the rabbit to the boar this time. From the looks of things, I finally hit level 5 as a spirit tamer, and unlocked the basic abilities to capture and raise a spirit beast. Though, now I had to figure out how to use them. Summon spirit, I thought in my mind, activating the skill. Or, attempting to at least. Contracted spirit razor boar has insufficient spiritual energy to be summoned. Well, what am I supposed to do about that? Feed spirit. I practically shouted in my mind. Only one spirit possessed currently. No food source available. Gritting my teeth, I moved to the next column of smoke and practically ripped it out of the ground. With my frustration, the pitiful rabbit spirit was instantly absorbed into my body. Feed spirit. Successfully contracted level 1 horned rabbit, stage 1. Please select the spirit to feed. Level 2 razor boar, plus 0.5 dexterity, plus 0.2 stamina. Level 1 horned rabbit. I mentally selected the razor boar, and then when it asked which spirit to use as food, I chose the rabbit. Once again, I watched the razor boar devour the helpless and motionless rabbit spirit. Guess that's not the right ability. Level 2 razor boar consumed level 1 horned rabbit. Dexterity plus 0.2. Sighing in frustration, I mentally activated absorb spirit, hoping to see any information it could provide. I really didn't want to keep going at this with no results whatsoever. No spiritual energy within range to absorb. Oh. Well, that's something. That implies I don't have to contract the spirit, just be near it. With a light nod of my head, I moved to yet another column of white smoke. This one seems to have been from multiple creatures, as the smoke rose from various areas around me. Absorb spirit. My next action was not what I expected. Like when I wanted to speak with the frightened rabbit spirit, I felt my mana being channeled into my mouth. However, I did not dissipate the spirits with my voice this time. Rather, I took a deep breath, and well, I breathed them in. At first, the white smoke showed signs of resisting, but I watched as it visibly struggled to fight against some invisible force, before flying directly into my mouth. Out of curiosity, I directed my senses inward and found a simple cloud of white gas near the boar. This cloud had no definite shape, no matter how I looked at it. It was simply a pure mass of spiritual energy. Feed spirit. Once again, I was given the prompt for which spirit to select to feed, but there was only one option. And, when it got to the next screen, please choose what food source you wish to give the razor boar. Spiritual energy 12 units. As it was the only option, I chose the spiritual energy. Similarly to how I inhaled the smoke just moments ago, I watched as the boar turned towards the cloud and took a deep breath, inhaling it as well. Once it was done, it no longer looked like a gaseous boar, but seemed to have a solid, white shape. Level 2 razor boar has advanced to stage 2, and may now be summoned. Finally, I gave a sigh of relief as the boar showed actual improvement, before giving the command to summon it. Carefully, I observed the movements my body made, and the flow of energy that occurred within me. I could clearly feel the boar starting to charge as if it was a stampede throughout my entire body. In the next moment, it leapt into the air, and there was a white light shining from my chest. This light seemed to act as a door, because the boar flew out of it a moment later to stand in front of me. Its eyes did not look at me with hostility, but with a vacantness as if awaiting a command. Roll over. I spoke, unsure of what to do. However, once it heard that, the boar properly rolled over. Or, it tried to at least. Fun fact, boars don't roll very well. Once it got onto its side, it was a comedic scene of watching the boar kicking at the air and the ground to try to get onto its back and complete the roll. Alright, enough. Return. When I said that, the boar rolled itself back to its feet and charged at me. Having an idea where this was going, I simply let it happen, and watched as the boar opened up another hole of light in my chest to dive into. When the light faded, the boar was nowhere to be seen. Okay, well that's cool. Finally, my work training my spirit tamer class was complete. Now, I could finally work on my next class. Given the training I did previously in the admin room, I decided to get the monk class next. The requirement for this class was actually really easy, it's just training it beyond that point is more difficult. Finding an empty patch of grass and flowers, I sat down on the ground cross-legged. In order to acquire the monk class, I simply had to meditate. Clear my mind, sense the world around and within. Breathe in, let the air flow through me. Breathe out, expel my worries. I kept this up for roughly an hour, breathing in and out, doing my best to keep my mind clear. Having been a truck driver in my past life, it was actually very easy to think about nothing at all. Every job has at least some perks, right? Monk class unlocked. Key pool unlocked. Key fist ability unlocked. I abruptly opened my eyes when I heard the dinging of the messages appearing, and let out a wide smile. About time. I quickly stood up, stretching a bit as I looked over my updated character sheet. Name, Dale Mitchell. Race, Human Keeper. Health, 38/38. 184/184. Mana, 48/48. 64/64. Strength, 5. 10. Key, 9 knights. 27/27. Stamina, 5. 10. Intelligence, 7. 9. Dexterity, 5. 7. Wisdom, 9. 11. Luck 5. Charm 4. Class list. Druid 03. Farmer 01. Hunter 04. Leader 02. Mage 15. Monk 13. Priest 13. Scholar 01. Scout 02. Shaman 01. Spirit Tamer 55. Warrior 112. I nodded my head in satisfaction at the increases and again navigated the window to exit to the admin room. This time, I probably wouldn't be descending again for quite a while, at least for a few hundred years by the world's time. Chapter 11, Plans for Tomorrow. Once I had ascended, Tara again greeted me. This time, her greeting wasn't as exaggerated as before, since she knew I would have been able to easily handle whatever happened. Welcome back, Dale. She said with a nod and a smile. For once, she seemed to be wearing clothes, which came across as a surprise. Though I had to say, they looked good on her. For her top, Tara chose to wear a tight white sleeveless shirt, which perfectly emphasized her chest. As for pants, she was wearing blue jeans with slightly frayed legs, and a tiny hole in the back for her tail to come out from. When she saw me admiring her, she struck a pose, placing one hand on her hip while her other arm was flat against her side. Like what you see? Well, if we're being honest. Very much so. What's the occasion? Given how comfortable she had been walking around naked lately, I didn't expect to suddenly find her in clothes, no matter how attractive. Figured I'd try out a few outfits between now and the meeting. Would be a bit rude if we showed up naked, right? She asked with a light giggle, bringing a hand to cover her mouth. Ah, that's true. Though, we still have quite a bit of time before that. Hopefully, I can get the world to advance a bit more before we are ready. Don't want to seem like a complete newbie, you know. At that, she gave me a knowing smile. Even though you are one. Exactly. I replied with a nod. Now, I had an idea I wanted to talk to you about, because I'm not sure how it would work with the system. Hearing that, Tara gave a happy nod and hopped back to land on the bed, sitting down with her legs crossed. Go ahead, I'm all cat ears. She smiled, her ears twitching to emphasize her point. Well, I was thinking about having one of my civilizations using their culture to master magic, while having another work on technology. Then maybe, when the two cultures meet, the two could blend. Technology amplifying magic, and vice versa. After voicing my idea, Tara sat in thought for a while. This was the longest she had debated on something since I had created her. After maybe 10 minutes of furrowing her brows and looking like she was debating something with herself, she spoke up. It is possible. But I wouldn't suggest doing it with this world. The greatest candidates for a tech society are the humans, and the dwarves, whereas the elves are the obvious choice for a magic society. However, in your current world, The clashing of two drastically different cultures at that stage of their development could lead to an all-out war of domination. Even with keeper guidance, that might be unavoidable. We could minimize damage with careful oversight, but two drastically different cultures clashing before being fully developed almost always leads to war. Saying up to this point, Terra continued. However, the magic system you chose has roots in science. If you give it time to properly develop before the two cultures meet, there would be a higher chance of coexistence. But this level of development wouldn't happen before two cultures of the same planet meet. So, while the plan is possible, I can't suggest it. I can only suggest that you try to develop the magic for this world, and use your next world to develop technology. Then, when the two cultures are fully developed, purchase a method for people to cross between them. That seems like the best option to me. There is even the chance that technology could be minorly developed in this world's culture due to the study of the laws governing magic. Likewise, as long as you don't put a particular restriction on magic in your second world, there could be some people that discover it while studying technology. I listened to her, moving to sit in the computer chair as I thought it over. So, it wouldn't be a good move to do in this world? But getting another world isn't exactly an easy matter. Wouldn't I have to win an invasion to do that? That means killing another keeper. Terra showed me a soft smile at that point. Dale, this is why you need to go to that meeting with Elcahest. There are things you don't know about the games yet, and can only be explained by people who have experienced it themselves. I can point you in the right direction, but that's it. Wouldn't it be too much of a cheat if I was able to know and tell you the business of other keepers? I thought about that, and gave a slight nod. Okay. I then turned to the computer and set it to fast forward the world again. This time, the condition for ending the fast forward was for when someone reached level 10 as a mage. That would give me a good starting point to learn magic. At the same time, I opened up the elves culture screen. Gandra cultural management. Current commands and /A. Current ruler Eldwin Ryan. Current security 5%. Current wealth and /A. Current focus, defense. Additional options. Opening up the additional options menu, I saw a list of things that I could choose to edit with the system. For instance, I could give the current monarch the idea to have a royal palace constructed. Or, more importantly, I could focus their culture development on a specific aspect for a certain period of time. That was what I was looking for. I naturally chose magic research as a secondary field of development. According to the information provided by the system, that meant that any capable people would devote their free time to studying magic, and people born during that period had a higher chance to be suited for the task. The difference between a secondary field of development and a primary one was exactly that, the amount of manpower devoted. Given the world's primal state, where attacks can come at any time, I wanted to leave their current defense focus as it was. Switching that to a secondary field would probably make it much easier for monsters to slip in undetected. Now, for the duration, it would cost me 1 point for every 5 years I wanted to implement this, or 100 points to make it a permanent option. Naturally, I didn't have 100 points right now, so I spent 10 points. This way, they will spend the next 50 years developing magic. Once I had more points to spend, I could set periods of advancement for other cultures as well, but for now I had to prioritize the elves. Once the purchase was confirmed, I checked their culture window again. Gandra cultural management. Current commands and /A primary, magic research secondary. Current ruler Eldwin Ryan. Current security 5%. Current wealth and /A. Current focus, defense. Additional options. I nodded my head at that, and checked on the other races. Due to the current state of fast forwarding, movements went by in a blur. Days ticked by as seconds, and I could see a definite improvement in some of the races. The Beastkin, with their greater numbers and cooperation, erected primitive defensive structures such as spiked walls and guard patrols within the first 2 years. The humans, still untouched by either Terra or myself, started to band together in small tribes to fight against the growing monsters. The dwarves seemed to develop a bit as well. As I watched, they gathered into 5 small tribes, each in vastly different areas. Perhaps, the only race that did not show much advancement was the halflings. They remained as they had always been, a merry wandering race. But, something seemed different. Oftentimes, they would wander through monster dens, or past dangerous herds, and not be sighted. It wasn't that the monsters were careless, but the halflings had developed a knack for stealth. This development continued for roughly an hour, at which point it abruptly slowed to a normal pace. Off to the side, Tara couldn't help but giggle. You know, if you had stopped watching for a bit, it would have been able to progress faster, right? You could have grabbed a snack, and it would have been done by the time you got back. I smiled bitterly, shaking my head. It was nice to watch them progress. Besides, if an emergency had happened, I might not have been able to do anything to stop it if I wasn't watching. Tara nodded, conceding that point to me. Now, what kinds of spells are available to the mages that advance to level 10? Yes, I know that I assign the spells myself. But really, do you expect me to keep track of every ability and spell that I assigned for around 50 different classes all the way to the high hundreds in level? That is just ridiculous. I was mostly idling through that and going by system suggestions in order to speed up the process anyways. Well, they have gotten 3 new spells since you last practiced. A light spell, a spark spell, and a shield spell. Tara answered, seemingly not even having to think about it. This should be enough for you to start making some small spells of your own, if you study them enough. She said with a smile, which meant that there were most likely aspects of the spells that were similar enough to draw connections. Alright, let's get to work. I said with a nod, and we moved down towards the training area so that I could try the new spells out. Eldwin Ryan sat at her chair, 5 different drawings in front of her. Each was a symbol of power to her people, as each had been provided by the world itself to those that sought to further the art of magic. The mages, as they were called, had committed themselves to understanding and improving this strange power. And, as they did so, these symbols continued to appear in her mind. 3 of them were images that Eldwin herself could not be more familiar with. They were the spells designated fire, ice, and light which she had personally acquired. However, the other 2 were ones which she had yet to grasp. According to the mages that delivered them, they were known as Spark and Shield. One capable of paralyzing a nearby target with a blast of light, and the other capable of defending. How many more of these symbols of power are there, she wondered to herself. She had personally tested Spark and Shield, and discovered that they worked even if she had not unlocked them. She merely needed to imagine them and fill them with her inner power in the same way she did when casting her own powers. Further testing showed that anyone who was a mage could do the same thing. Even people without that title could with proper guidance, and doing so granted it to them. Seeing the power offered by these strange patterns, Eldwin issued an order for all mages in her realm to devote themselves to the discovery of these powers, these spells. As the seasons passed, the monsters at their walls only continued to grow stronger. They needed these symbols to be their symbol of hope, or these creatures may grow to an extent that they can no longer contend with. Back in the plains of beginning, there was an elderly felon lying on a bed of straw. Her beautiful face had wrinkled with age, her fiery red hair turning a dull gray. Across her body was the pelt of a mighty beast, which she had personally slain in her youth. Standing near her were representatives of each of the tribes which she led, those who she had gathered and had ruled over until she came to her current state. "What would you have of us, Ardra?" one asked, an aged wolf with a missing eye. It may have caused his appearance to lessen, but he was proud of it. It was a mark gained in the service to his people. The elderly felon Ardra Firebrand gave a light, weak smile. "It is almost time for my passing. Before I go, I want to choose who will take my place." She brought her hand to her mouth, coughing into it. Blood could be seen on her hand as she pulled it back. "My daughter is not ready for the task, but there is another. I want you all to guide her in my stead, old friends." The Ursa, Lycan, and Kitsune leaders all dropped to one knee. The Kitsune, a younger man with black hair and fur, was the first to speak. "If it is your wish, we will do our best. But, if not Kyra, then who?" Truthfully, Ardra had always wanted her daughter, Kyra Firebrand, to replace her when it was her time. However, the goddess had told her that Kyra was not suited to rule. This was one of the few decisions that Ardra had initially wanted to debate with her goddess, but she was given a vision. She was shown her daughter excelling, but not as a leader. She would lead her people, yes, but in the ways of securing food. Instead, there was another, a local Kitsune girl that had been unknown to Ardra before. Ardra was given another vision of this Kitsune leading their tribe to prosper and expand, to fight back the growing threat of the monsters. Following the goddess's wish, she had not revered her openly, and did not tell anyone that various decisions over her rule were aided by the goddess. This, she could only tell to her successor. "The person who will lead us is Mara Eversong. Ardra spoke in a weak voice, to the surprise of the three representatives. Please, send her to me. I wish to speak with her alone. Although unwilling, the Beastmen representatives left Ardra's hut, finding the girl that had been named and instructing her to meet the Grand Elder. This was possibly her final day, so none wished to delay Ardra's orders. She had personally transformed them from scattered families to a great force. With her in command, food had never been a problem. She had always fought at the forefront of any battle against the monster threat. In the hearts of the Beastkin, there was only respect for Ardra, respect and loyalty. What do you wish of me, Grand Elder? A shaky voice could be heard as a silver-haired kitsune, no more than a dozen years of age, entered. Her body was undeveloped, and her ears flattened against her head in nervousness. Never before had she personally met the Grand Elder, but suddenly she was called on the eve of her passing. Do not worry, dear child. Ardra spoke softly, turning her head to look at the person chosen to replace her. I have many things to tell you, things that you must know, and things that can't be said to others. Still worried, Mara nodded her head, listening quietly as Ardra spoke. She was told of the goddess, how it had been her decision to gather the races, and how important she had been to Ardra's rule. Then, she spoke of how the goddess had personally decided for Mara to replace her. Mara was surprised by this sudden declaration and immediately tried to deny this suggestion, but a voice spoke into her mind. Calm, my child. This is what must be. This was the first time that Mara had ever heard the voice of the goddess, and she immediately froze in her attempts to speak. Seeing this, Ardra knew what had happened, and gave a gentle smile. Slowly, she closed her eyes, having finally fulfilled her last mission. On that night, no monsters attacked, no storms raged. A gentle wind blew through the plains, as if the world itself was mourning.